can we call the roll call, please?
Commissioner Shoemaker.
Present.
Commissioner David isn't here yet. Commissioner Gossick-Seidman.
Present.
Vice Mayor Moore.
Present.
Mayor Hillman.
Present.
Town Manager Labadie.
Present.
And Town Attorney Tresivia isn't here yet.
Okay, can we rise, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we need an approval of the agenda. Is there anybody that wants to add anything or remove anything? No? Okay. Need a motion to approve it as it stands?
I move we approve the agenda.
Is there a
I second that.
All in favor, just say aye.
Aye.
This is to declare the candidate elected of office, and here she comes. Da, 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 da. Perfect timing. Okay, it's found on page 8. This is a resolution of the Town Commission of the Town of Highland Beach, Florida, declaring an unopposed candidate elected to the office and providing for an effective date. Whereas the Town of Highland Beach, the town's general election was scheduled for March 8th, 2022 in accordance with the law and the town charter. And whereas the candidate qualifying period for the town's general election commenced November 9, 2021 at noon and ended November 23, 2021 at noon, with one candidate qualifying for the office of commissioner. And whereas according to the Section 101.151, parens 7 and parens, Florida statutes, exempt from justices or judges seeking retention, the names of unopposed candidates shall not appear on the general election ballot. Each unopposed candidate shall be deemed to have voted for himself or herself. And whereas in these circumstances, the election code authorizes the governing body to declare the unopposed candidate elected to office, and whereas no candidate for the office of commissioner appeared on the ballot in the March 8th, 2022 election, and whereas the Town Commission deems approval of this resolution to be the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of and citizens of the town of Highland Beach and the public at large. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Town Commission of the Town of Highland Beach, Florida, that Section 1, recitals, the above recitals are true and correct and are incorporated herein by this reference. Section 2, election results. Town Commission hereby declares that each unopposed candidate is elected to the office of commissioner, and as such hereby finds and declares that Evelyn David has been elected to the office of commissioner for a 3-year term beginning March 15th, 2022 and ending March of 2025. Section 3, effective date, the resolution shall become in full force and effect immediately upon its passage and adoption. Done and adopted by the Town Commission of the Town of Highland Beach, Florida, this 15th day of March, 2022. What's next?
We need a motion on resolution number 2022-006.
I move we accept 5A resolution number 2022-006.
I second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, tough.
Welcome. Again.
And they're swearing in?
We also have the resolution 2022-007 adopting the results.
So now we have to go through that separately?
Yes, 2 separate items.
I don't know that you need to read the whole thing.
Just the
Not
title.
necessary. Okay. Resolution number 2022-007, the resolution of the Town Commission of the Town of Highland Beach, Florida, declaring the results of municipal referendum election held on March 8th, 2022, providing an effective date and for other purposes. Done and adopted by the Town Commission of the Town of Highland Beach, Florida, this 15th day of March 2022.
We need a motion.
I move we accept item 6A, resolution number 2022-007.
Second,
Okay, thank you.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we move on to the election results.
That's what we just did.
Okay, but do we want to go through them and discuss them?
You adopted the resolution. That is at the discretion of the commission if you all wanted to discuss the results.
Well, we do, and that is, it's coming up later. Okay, we'll move on now to public comments. I have
You
Barry
have to swear it in.
Donaldson.
So now we
Pardon?
need to
The
swear.
swearing in of
The
Commissioner
swearing
David.
in.
What's that?
Now it's the swearing in. It's number 7.
Yes,
Okay.
not the swearing.
Let's swear her in.
Okay.
Yeah, this is fine.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I won't repeat your name. I
Evelyn David,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support, protect, and defend
that I will support, protect, and defend
the Constitution and government
the Constitution and government
of the United States
of the United States
and of the state of Florida
and of the state of Florida
against all enemies, domestic or foreign,
against all enemies, domestic and foreign,
and that I will bear true
and that I will bear true
faith, loyalty, and allegiance to the
Faith.
same.
loyalty and allegiance to the same,
And I am entitled to hold office
and I am entitled to hold office
under the Constitution of the United States
under the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of Florida,
and the Constitution of the state of Florida,
and that I will faithfully perform all the duties
and that I will faithfully perform all the duties
of the office of Commissioner
of the office of Commissioner
on which I am about to enter.
on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Blue or black or does?
Oh, it's official. Okay, now for public comments. Barry, you're up.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the commission, Barry Donaldson, 3700 South Ocean Boulevard. During my recent interview a few months ago for a vacant planning board appointment, a commissioner asked me a very pointed question. What did I learn from the failure of the referendums I supported, meaning the 3 separate town improvement referendums from a few years ago? I replied that I'd learned to accept criticism with grace and to continue to tell the truth. That is no less valid than it was a few months ago than it is today. So I'm here today with a few suggestions regarding the recent charter amendment questions. The short version is that there's good reason to overlook the hyperbole offered during the recent questions, make some modest changes, and try again. Keep in mind, a significant number of the voters, 40%, did support the 4 questions that failed. That support is something to build on. Now, the longer version, time permitting. One We saw an overwhelming acceptance of question 1, requiring a vote of the public before changes could be made to the essential services for police, fire, rescue, and the water departments. That also protects those same departments from actions by activist members of the public. I'm glad it passed. Enough said. Number 2, we saw the failure of question 2 regarding spending limits. Whatever one thinks of the question offered, the fixed limit is simply not financially or operationally sustainable at $350,000. Some who oppose the question have suggested a fixed number of around $750,000. At the end of the day, that stopgap amount is more workable than $350,000. It remains to be seen if those leading opposition to the original question will support their own suggestion, but I think it should be tried. We saw a failure of question 3 regarding check signing. I don't immediately perceive a middle ground on that one, but if one can be found, it should be proposed to take advantage of the new financial operating program that people of the town paid for. It would be a waste of their tax money not to do so. Number 4, we saw a failure of question 4 regarding a change in the terms of office. While the question sought to address the stability of governance, the majority of the voting public decided to leave things the way they are. The truth is that governance will continue either way. The commission has the option to maintain the status quo or evaluate a change that does not apply to current serving commissioners. That seems to have been favored by those leading the opposition. I suggest we take a look at changing that. Again, it does remain to be seen if they'll support their own recommendation. We saw a failure of question 5 regarding compensation. I would suggest the town commission consider modifying the language and include the base salary number, since that's what it was going to be anyway. However, in my opinion, equal work should get equal pay. I think that when a raise is granted, it should apply across the board. Everybody up here does the job. Everybody does the same work. So I would hold firm on that. Finally, it's notable, we didn't receive a single public comment or suggestion during our work at a presentation of the charter question by the mayor and town manager that I attended. The mayor remarked on the great number of people who showed up for the event. One person said, "We thought there would be wine and food." Yeah, it was fun, but a point was made. Community building exercises like the food truck events, coffee with the mayor, and the annual holiday celebrations are important. The commission, town staff, and management put a lot of effort into making those events happen. They bring us together. We need to find a way to capitalize on that, encourage public interaction, free the rancor and personal attacks that have come to characterize public debate in the Beach. Those who serve on advisory and quasi-judicial boards should also do their part to promote that civil discourse. That is no less important than the qualifications that they bring to you for public service. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
David Axelrod, 3740 South Ocean Boulevard. Good afternoon, commissioners, the mayor, and vice mayor. I'm glad that Barry just talked about this because I'm going to make some suggestions. Oh, thank you. On this. And I'm going to start with first the charter that says every 10 years you should review the charter. And it should be appointment of a board. Interestingly enough, the board, like any other board, should have been, you should have had people interviewed and come up before the board, not do just appointment that each one of you chose. And on April 21st of this year at a commission meeting, the way the board, that board was chosen, unlike any other board, was totally different. Each one of you picked somebody and there was no interview. Nobody in the public knew who these people were for the most part, except probably for Barry. Now let me go into a little further and look over some of these things. And I'm also going to mention something about the planning board. I think the planning board should have been involved in this. but I'll get to that in a little while. The easy one, first I'm going to look at the signing of the checks. I think every one of us here, and I know Doug, I think you've been a member of a board of the condo. We all sign checks. I don't see any reason why one of you can't sign a check. There are 5 of you, what, 2, 4, there are 5 of you. But once every month, if you did it, each one was responsible. Not a problem. Very easy to handle. I would say that one should be left alone. It was worthless and it shouldn't really have been any worth our time. Number 2, the spending limits. The spending limits could have been handled much differently. Thanks to Marshall, our town manager, I actually changed my vote from no to yes. Why did I do that? Because Florida 701 allows you only to, if you have a bond issue, you have to get a referendum, no matter what. You must get a referendum, no matter what the amount is. Also, if the tax raise is going to respond to that, you have to do that. None of these were, I think, ever mentioned to anybody in any of the public relations regarding these safeguards were there. I would also suggest adding that the finance board should have a situation and have to review these things on something like that. In fact, in Ocean Walk, if we recall, with the other referendum, it was the finance board actually that came forward and made it possible for the and brought the people to the amount of money and what it was going to cost us, et cetera. As far as a raise for underpaid commission, I definitely think the commission deserves a raise. I think we're lower than any other commission around. But I understand that you guys can vote yourself a raise and stuff like that. Yes, the answer is yes. It's in the chart. It says you can, the vote for a raise is by the commission. Going on. Finally, I'm going to go to the last one, the terms of the commission. And Vice Mayor, I'm going to use you as an example. In case anybody is interested, each space, you have you're allowed 2 terms as a position, but the mayor, vice mayor, and commissioner are looked at separately. So if Vice Mayor Moore chose 3 years to do this, and then wanted to do 6 years, and then wanted to become mayor and run for mayor, she can for 6 years, and then drop down to be a commissioner. She could be on this board for 18 years on this commission. Now, I don't know if you're aware of that, but it's a situation where you're totally independently. So increasing it, you'd be saying then 27 years. So I don't think that that's necessary to go on with that. And finally, I'm going to ask a question I was going to ask Marshall before. I've always been told that food services in condos and stuff like that were not allowed, that the only commercial issue that could be used was the Delray Sands. However, because I went through this, I looked at both the codes and the charter, and no place does it say that we can't have it. I would like an answer from the commission down the line some way, because you know what? I've been hit many times being on the board of Toscana where somebody's asked, why can't we have food at the beach club? And I know looking at the code actually has an area where it discusses food. Can I just finish up one more thing? And I just wanted to say, actually 2 things. The planning board should be involved more in the situation on these things like this. They're supposed to be doing the comprehensive planning. It has not been done in the last 6 years. We've never been asked to do it. We used to bring up other little points like the contract. John actually mentioned you mentioned the facilities, the marine facilities go into the planning board. You should ask the planning board to do it and then send it back to you. Finally, just in a little bit of light, and while I'm on it, looking at the charter and the code, it's very interesting. We have blue laws in this town. I don't know if you're aware of that. That's also in the charter. The blue laws say that you cannot serve alcohol on Sunday before noon. I'd hate to miss my mimosa cocktails when I go to the Delray Sands. So I think you have to review this. The code, there was a very limited result on this referendums, a very limited review. There's a lot of things that could be changed. And also in the code, where, for example, the code has been so old that there's a tax on pay phones. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Carl? Carl?
I plan to break, so after 13 time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I missed that. Jack? You're on the list. Yeah, come on.
We make an exception for you, Jack.
Jeez.
I have nice formal written comments, but before I start, I just want to make a comment on a previous speaker who talked about, but you got 40% of the voters to say yes. Well, if it was an equal footing and we had equal time span and things like that, and you take a look at the ballots, the written ballots and that versus the in-person ballots, you'll see the disparity between them and how much more people when they came out, because that was a later time frame that we got involved. We didn't get started for a couple of weeks. Hence the mail-in ballots showed that number. So don't look at your 40% as, oh, gee, we got 40% of the voters, because I don't think you would have gotten near that if we didn't have the education campaign. So let me begin my formal remarks. My name is Jack Halpern. I'm a retired engineering consultant and a 26-year resident of Highland Beach. My service in Highland Beach started with being a turtle handmaiden and then participation on multiple boards, including chairing two. Before I address why I came here today, I want to thank all of you, and I mean that, including Town Manager Marshall, for the work you've done, particularly supporting us, separating us from Delray Beach for our fire emergency response. Please believe me when I tell you that I and others received no pleasure coming out against our commission for this referendum. Up until then, we felt that you were mostly doing what we, the voters, wanted to see, and were doing a good job. The fact that you used the public relations firms to develop quotation marks educational mailings at the same time our state legislature was in the midst of outlawing such approaches seemed to us, to the public, as disingenuous. This resulted in a series of emails where a couple of our commissioners spoke poorly of one of our town citizens, John Ross. This was the same guy that organized the resistance that overwhelmingly defeated the $46 million bond issue, where at least 3 of you were also involved working on that defeat as well. He created an organization that provided information that may have been missed by town residents. Thank you, John Ross, wherever you are, for what you have done. Now, moving on. Yes, it is true. John will be moving soon, but CSHB will continue. Yes, I've been asked to spearhead this group. I'm evaluating and also meeting with people to see what the future may be for this organization. As a small town with all of us knowing each other, there is no reason why we cannot be working together. The firehouse bond issue was a perfect example. And by the way, I might point out, we had signs in front of my condominium for that firehouse bond issue. But miraculously, all of a sudden, the law must have changed or whatever, but all of a sudden we weren't allowed to put signs out for this referendum. Not playing fair, guys. Now to the future. We live on a barrier island, long and narrow. There are many challenges to us as a small community. I like the approach that the Florida Coalition for Preservation recently sent out. They're doing a survey to evaluate what citizens on barrier islands feel about all the issues, from crowded roadways to beach erosion to flooding. I, for one, think we need to look at all the issues facing the town of Highland Beach and looking where we want to be in the next 10 years. This is beyond trying to change the charter for commissioners, this and this and that. Probably that ought to be done by ordinance. Let's look at things that can be done to the charter and where we want to be in 10 years as a community. Yes, we can do this with a questionnaire, but I also think developing a focus group could be a better approach where we can get people with different minds together to explore what our future could be and what it should be. I will be meeting with people over the next couple of weeks to talk about where CSHB should be heading as an organization. Is the name a good name? How about developing an active board of directors? Let me say to any who are listening out in the internet world, we'd love to have your participation on developing a board of directors. Feel free to email me directly at jahalpern@comcast.net. That's jahalpern@comcast.net. If you have an interest in the future of our town and want to participate, please email me. Thank you all for your consideration out in the internet world. Lastly, I want to bring up that the information flow could be much better from the town. For example, what's happening with Milani Park? I was involved testifying against that 12 years ago. Where are things at? What's going on? We're very interested because that can have a major impact on our town, but it seems to have gone into dead silence. What's happening with the Florida Department of Transportation and the grant and the work for redoing A1A? That seems to have gone into a silence. How will this work relate to the planning upcoming project with our sewer lines? Thank you for your time this afternoon and look forward for all of us, and that's capital ALL, working together in the interest of Highland Beach. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jack. Okay, we'll move on to board vacancies. Natural Resources Preservation Advisory Board has one vacancy for an unexpired term ending April 30th, 24. Planning Board has one vacancy for a 3-year term. Upcoming meetings and events. April 5th at 1:30 is the next Town Commission meeting. April 12th, 1 o'clock is Code Enforcement. April 14th at 9:30 is Planning Board regular meeting. There are no board action reports, no ordinances, no consent agendas, unfinished business. We're going to take a look at the water sewer billing update from Vice Mayor Moore, page 24.
Thank you, Mayor. Since the data was in, we can now compare 12 months worth of data to the previous 12 months of data. Previously, I had compared a shorter time period. So for completeness, here's the full year.
Excuse me a minute. Do we have a slide?
Yes, it's page 24. I don't know if they're going to put it up on the screen, but if you turn to page 24 of your agenda. It's on.
I'm thinking about the people in the audience. So let's just hold off for a second. Okay.
Kind of hard to see, but I don't know if you can zoom in a little bit.
Can you see that? Those?
There we go.
There we go. Okay, great.
Very nice.
Got it. Do we need the pointer?
No, I don't. I think I'm good. So I had presented this probably a month ago based on 5 bills. The 5 bills, April 21 through January 22, compared to April 20 to January 21. And so we're looking at the yearly, the 6 bills compared to the previous 6 bills. And so if you could look at column B, the bottom of column B, it shows that there was a 17% increase in billed amounts from the prior year. And I find that interesting because when I looked at the shorter, portion of the year, it was actually 23%. And the target, according to the Raftelis study, was we were trying to get to 19%. So whereas on the shorter time period, it looks like we were ahead of schedule. But actually now that we look at the full year, we're slightly behind. Because I think we were hoping that maybe we didn't have to take the full increases going forward. because the next annual increase is about an 11% increase. And then after that, it's another 5%. And then after that, another 2.5%.
Refresh our memory. What was our target?
Our target was 19.
Was 19.
And at the last update I presented, that number, instead of 17, was 23. So
Mhm.
we were sitting here hoping, oh, we must have gotten more revenue than we expected. But now that we have the full year, it actually turned out to be less than our target. So I just wanted to point that out. The analysis is still similar in that previously, under the previous rate structure, the condos represented 77% of the total billings, and the single families represented 20%. And we wanted to make it more equitable among the condos versus the single family. And so it did get more equitable. The condos now represent 73%. If you look at so I'm looking at column A and I'm looking at the upper portion. So if you look at condos, they now represent 73%. Whereas if you look at the table below, previously they represented 77%. So the portion of dollars that the condo represents has shrunk, which is a goal of our rate change. And the single families, currently their billings represent 23% of the billings, whereas previously it was 20%. So they had more of a rate increase. And you see that on column 11. So column 11, overall condos received an 11% increase, and single families received a 36% increase. If you go to the right, what column C shows is the usage. So when you look at the actual water flow used by condos and single families, you'll see that condos, they represent 61% of the water flow. And then single families represent about 35% of the water flow. So I provided all this analysis to Marshall so he can share it with Raftalis, and then we can, move forward. But it looks like to me, we're going to continue with the rate increase that Raftalis had proposed going forward.
Yep. So we missed it by about 80,000.
Yeah, and I think a big reason, and I can tell you from personal experience, I'm trying to reduce the water flow. And I think the thing is, single families are in a better position to control our water compared to condos. And I think that's why when we brought this extra set of billings on, that's why it kind of changed things, is because the single families, I think, took a look at their bills and did reduce consumption. I know I did. Told my kids to stop taking such long showers. So yeah, I mean, I think that's something to watch for. And I think it was something that we had thought about when we created the new rate structure, is the change in utilization of water flow and how that will impact revenues. So it is possible that if condos and more single families continue to conserve water because of the bills, that's something to look out for.
Any questions? Any comments? Very good. Anybody out there want to make a comment? Okay, good report. Thank you. Move on. Okay, move on to accessory marine facilities. Da-da-da. It's on page 27.
Good afternoon, Ingrid Allen, Town Planner for the record. So on page 27 of your packets, I prepared a agenda memorandum regarding an introduction item which is a proposed amendment to the accessory marine facility provisions that are in the zoning code. Staff has been working with former Vice Chair Greg Bobby. He's actually sponsoring the amendment. We've had several meetings with him, I think within the last year. It's been a year, or at least, or maybe even a little bit more than that. And on page 27, I've gone ahead and prepared a table which outlines, okay. I've gone ahead and prepared a table which outlines the proposed amendments and how those proposed amendments, how they are addressed currently in the code. Just to give you a little bit of background as to whether some of these provisions that are being proposed are somewhere in the code, maybe not with as much detail as being proposed. So I hope that gives you a little bit of guidance in your review and consideration today. I guess then I'll just go ahead and defer to Mr. Bobby. He'll get into a little bit more detail with regards to his draft report, which is found on page 30 of your packets, and I'll be happy to chime in a little bit later as well.
Thanks, Ingrid. Greg Bobby, 1092 Bell Lido Drive. Linelda, can you bring our little drawing up that I sent over to you? There we go, the 3D box. So as Ingrid said, there was over the last year, we had a working group consisting of Marshall, Ingrid, Jeff Remus, building official, Mike Jenkins, who's a consultant for the marine accessories for the town, and myself. And we took a look at the marine accessory ordinances. We tried to figure out areas where there's been conflict and other areas where there's some foreseeable conflict, and try to leverage what's been done around other towns to make some recommendations to correct them. Some of our ordinances just lack some detail or some clarity on topics, areas like the maximum allowable height of pilings, or there's a incongruity between jet ski lifts and boat lifts. And in other areas, we looked to just use this as an opportune time to edit some of the ordinances for some anticipated future issues that we see coming up. So I'll walk you through them, and then it's really up to the commission to decide where we want to go with this. That property that's up there in the drawing, that's not in Highland Beach, just a generic Boca Raton property. And the reason why I created that is I wanted everyone to envision the idea of a 3D box behind each waterfront home. And the purpose of it is pretty simple. If it fits within the box, it's pretty much allowable. If it doesn't fit within the box, it really shouldn't be there. The box does not go all the way to property lines. It has setbacks on the side. We care about heights. We care about depths into the waterway. We care about side setbacks. And the reason why we were thinking of the box concept is marine accessories keep evolving. It used to just be simple boat lifts, whether it's a 4-post or an elevator lift. Then you had floating vessel platforms. Now they've got sea pens where they actually sink down, and then they basically fill up like a sock around your boat. And the gear is going to keep changing and changing and changing. And if we keep trying to define every piece of apparatus, we will always be a step behind. So the better idea is to create a concept that works. And then as new apparatus is created, we don't have to go back to the drawing board again and again. So I'll walk you through the 6 recommendations we made, and then you can let us know where you want to go from there. The first one was to have a maximum allowable height for marine accessories. And we came up with making a height of base flood elevation plus 7 feet. We reference base flood elevation opposed to anything fixed on land because over time, the base flood elevation changes as the sea level rises. So what we didn't want to do is to have to constantly keep rewriting the ordinances every time the base flood elevation changes.
And what is it today? The base flood elevation, how many feet?
It depends on the property, but generally speaking, it's 6 feet.
On the, sorry. Jeff Amos, building official, Town of Highland Beach. Right now, it's currently 6 feet. on the intercoastal side, and it varies anywhere from 10 to 13 feet on the ocean side.
It's important to note that most everything we're talking about for these type of marine accessory ordinances are on the intercoastal side, not the ocean side. So recommendations, base flood elevation plus 7 feet. The reason we came up with this is what we don't want is as apparatus gets stronger and better built, it would be ideal not to have boat lifts, boats, or anything else for that matter, 20 feet up in the air. And although it's not possible to necessarily do it at the moment, doesn't mean it can't be over time. There aren't a lot of other towns that actually do this, but I think you're going to start seeing other towns doing this. So that's recommendation number 1. So that's basically the height of the box. Recommendation number 2 is we have an incongruency between jet ski lifts or personal watercraft lifts, as you call them, and boat lifts. And part of it comes from our language in our code, where it says, in no case shall a lift be higher than the superstructure of a boat when lifted. So that's kind of interesting because if you put in a generic lift and we pop a boat on it, and a boat, if you look at it from the side, has an elevation 5 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet, no problem, it can go on the lift. We use that exact same lift and we put a jet ski on it, which has a low profile, like 2 feet, it's illegal, but it's the exact same lift. So it's just a strange way the language is written. We recommended one of 2 things. We can either just remove that section of the language about superstructure, or we can just exempt jet skis and personal watercraft. Either way is fine, but this one's actually come up a lot where I live in Bellito, but in other areas as well, where residents are trying to put in a lift. They're honest, and they say, I'm going to put a jet ski on it, and it gets basically turned down because the jet ski, but if they said they were putting a boat on it, it would have been fine. So a little bit strange.
Greg?
Yes.
Just a quick question. Looking at the photograph, I see a jet ski there. And it looks like it's on the property line of the neighbor.
That's true. That's on the property line of the neighbor. And this is in Boca Raton, not in Highland.
It's in Boca, I understand. So that's illegal.
For the concept that we're proposing here, that would not be allowed.
That would not be allowed because you want 10-foot setbacks. But also you're saying that within the box, they can go up as high as a boat.
As base flood elevation, the highest the apparatus can be is base flood elevation plus 7 feet.
Period.
That's the apparatus.
Right.
So if the boat went up above that, that's okay. But that's any sort of lift structure.
Very good.
The third one is proposing a maximum seawall cap width and a maximum dock width. And we spent a lot of time thinking about this. The seawall cap is the top part of your seawall that you see. And the way you build a traditional seawall is you put in vertical pilings, angled batter pilings, wall face, it's done like Legos, a wall face, which is a sheet, and then a cap that's poured on the top to tie everything together to stop it from moving. The width of the cap, as you go from your backyard, if you were going to go to walk into the water, traditionally is anywhere from 30 to 36 inches for a new cap now. A long time ago, they used to be 24 inches, and you might see a few properties that have really old walls that have 12-inch caps. You can certainly make them wider if you want. You could probably make them as big as you like, particularly now because you can build a cap like a Twinkie and put foam in the middle. And that makes it pretty light. So then you can build all sorts of funky looking things if you really want. So our recommendation is let's set some parameters around the width of the cap and the width of the dock, because we want to kind of keep everything somewhat in a conforming nature. We don't want someone to put a 5-foot wide cap and then a 6-foot wide dock, and they basically created their own little peninsula, if you will. So we recommended a seawall cap of 3 feet and a maximum distance of cap plus dock at 8 feet. And the reason why we did it that way is some older properties might have a 24-inch cap. Great, have a 6-foot dock, you're out to the 8-foot part. If you have a 3-foot cap, you can have a 5-foot dock. If you have a 4-foot cap, you have a 4-foot dock. But that way, the outer edge of every dock is about the same distance into the water, and we don't have an issue where one property is extending their dock so far out into the water that it might become a hazard to navigation. The next item we proposed is defining a maximum distance that the marine accessories can extend out into the water. So this is the entire distance from your property line out directly towards the water, perpendicular. A lot of other towns have this in their code. We don't. What we have is we simply defer to the Army Corps of Engineers and whatever they say is good for the town. Kind of interesting, and it's probably makes a little bit more sense to have a little bit more say on it. We propose 25 feet or 25% of the distance across the waterway, whatever is less. The reason why we have that is we might have a canal that's 80 feet. We certainly don't want two properties going out 25 feet each, and then there's only 30 feet down the center to actually navigate. So it's the lesser of. Now, the 25-foot mark was very carefully thought about. We thought about the cap width, and we thought about the dock, and that goes to 8 feet. And we looked at boat lifts, and a typical boat lift that you might see around Highland Beach is for 30,000 pounds, 40,000 pounds, 50,000 pounds. 50,000 pounds is a pretty big boat. That's probably a 45, almost 50-foot boat. The width of that lift would be about 17 feet. Perfect. We're right at the 25-foot part. If you have a 3-foot cap, a 5-foot dock, and a relatively large lift, you're right at the 25-foot marker. So someone should be able to buy a home, have a standard cap, have a dock in it, and not have a problem with having to get a lift in if the previous owner didn't have a lift.
What's the typical width of our canals? I know they're going to vary.
I'm going to say you've got to be close to 100 feet, right? We might have one that's less than 100, but I would say it's closer to 100.
So figuring 25 on one side, 25 on the other, you still got a 50-foot.
Got 50 foot down the center, which is a lot of space.
Not bad. Okay.
We also took a look at really, really large lifts, mega lifts. Lifts that could lift boats that are almost the whole width of your property kind of thing. And whether it's an 80,000 or 100 or 120,000 pound lift, it's a massive lift. I don't think I've ever actually seen one in real life, but they do make them. I'm pretty sure we have not had a request to have one in Highland Beach, but we looked at it anyway because it might happen. And those lifts are about 23 feet wide. Okay, so if someone really wants the mega lift for the mega boat, you're not going to have a dock. And if you have a big cap, you can actually notch out a foot of the cap to put the pilings in for the lift. So theoretically, we could come up with almost any reasonable combination for a new resident without having to destroy everything that's already on their property. But what they can't have is they can't have everything. They can't have the maximum dock, the maximum cap, the maximum lift, the maximum everything. You have to have a little bit of reasonableness. So that's the reason why we came up with the 25 feet. Some other towns have a smaller size. Some towns do say 20 feet as the maximum. I think we will run into problems with that because a normal size cap and a normal size dock, you're not going to fit a normal size lift. Now you're going to make the variance board's life very busy. So it seemed a little bit too restrictive really for no reason. The next one is side setbacks. Highland Beach is really, really unique in the side setbacks. We use a very discrete function the way we calculate it. So if you have we have 25-foot setbacks, but then they jump down to a 15-foot setback. So in this town, if you have a 71-foot wide piece of property, you have a 25-foot setback. If you have a 69-foot wide property, you have a 15-foot setback, which is sort of strange. Your property difference is only 2 feet. Not sure how it all came up that way, but doesn't really make a lot of sense. We also have different setbacks for the property type. So single family homes have these 25 or 15s. Multifamily properties have a 0-foot setback. So you could actually do your dock right to the edge of your property. If you wasn't already that way, you wouldn't write it that way. So we figured might as well try to correct it. And we took a good look at what other towns do. And our proposal is more of a smooth function, particularly since there are a few properties in Bellito that are right around that. We're not sure what the size is. Is it 70, 71, or 69? But it's really close. So I guess it depends on what surveyor you get and where you stand on where you want your setbacks to be. So we thought the most simple thing is, let's just have a very smooth function. For properties that are 100 feet wide or more, let's have 10-foot setbacks on either side. This does a few different things. One, it matches the surrounding towns. Boca Raton has 10-foot setbacks. Hillsborough Beach has 10-foot setbacks. Ocean Ridge has 10-foot setbacks. It's not odd. It's a pretty standard number, actually. But the other thing that it does is because we've got this box concept and we're saying everything has to fit in the box, it gives us a little buffer at the end of every property. Listen, whatever you want to put in your backyard, if it doesn't fit in the box, it's not going there. So it stops the jet ski lift right at the edge of the property. It stops the situation where one person puts a boat lift in, the neighbor puts a boat lift in, they're right on top of each other, then each one of them points their finger to the other saying, I can't get my boat off the lift. So we've given ourselves a little bit of a 10-foot buffer on either side. That's a 20-foot buffer in total. That gives you a little bit of room to maneuver. So for properties that are 100 feet or more wide, 10-foot setbacks. For properties that are smaller than 100 feet, we'll have a setback of 10% of the property width on either side. So for that 71-foot property, it'd be 7.1 feet. For that 69-foot property, it'd be 6.9 feet. But in no situation whatsoever will there ever be less than a 5-foot setback. That addresses the multifamilies, which have a 0-foot setback. Let's at least have a little bit of space. And in all practicality, it makes sense if you're sitting in your backyard and your neighbor's dock goes right to the edge of the property line and they feel like sitting in their little beach chairs and looking over to your backyard, it probably feels a little bit too intrusive. So it's nice to have a little bit of space. So that's the proposal we have for there. Number 6 is a proposal I'm sure no one will debate. We don't have a requirement, an explicit requirement for a ladder on our docks, but almost every other town does. So you want to have a dock, put a ladder in at least once every 50 feet. If you have a really big dock, have more than one ladder. They're not that expensive. They're easy to put in. The last one, number 7, it's really more of just making it clear. It's strengthening some language a bit. We already have the ability to do this, but we have a bunch of areas in Highland Beach what are called discontinuities in waterways, turns in canals, basins at the end of canals. You have corner properties that you just can't write code. And we tried to write code to have deal with all these things. And the marine accessory consultant said, listen, you're never going to write anything that works. No other town does either. So just make it very clear. There are special cases, whether they're really tiny properties or they're at the end of canals or at any of these discontinuities, they're special cases. And the resident should expect that the building department is going to employ a consultant to help recommend what should be done. And it's going to be up to the planning board. That's what the planning board's for, is to make those game time decisions of what fits where and when, and are they disadvantaging the neighbor by putting a lift in a certain location? We have the ability to do this now. So it's really more just tweaking the language a little bit so every resident knows we're not picking on them if they're at the end of a canal. It's just you're at the end of a canal. We're always going to employ the expertise of the consultant to make sure we're not making a mistake. Those are our recommendations. We didn't write any actual code language. This is all concept. And if you want us to work on all of them, great. Some of them, great. If you want to get resident feedback and then decide, that's fine too. But we defer to you and where you want us to go next.
Okay, let's kick it around. John, I'll start with you.
So Greg, as usual, always a thorough, comprehensive job.
Thanks.
And I'm fairly ignorant of this, so I read your material, looking to really to get the education and then figure out, okay, where do I ask a question? The base flood elevation is going to continue to change and increase. So that means the height of the box will continue to increase.
Right.
How often are you expecting to have that change? I guess the box, because you're giving specific numbers, unless you're saying it doesn't really matter, the box moves with the base.
That's the
flood
nice part
elevation.
about the box is the vertical part of the box moves with base flood elevation. The distance out into the water and the distance to the side of the properties actually is fixed.
So this doesn't force us into always trying to adjust the numbers.
That's what we want to get away from.
Exactly.
Particularly since what if you have an adjustment and one resident got something approved before the adjustment and one gets something approved different after the adjustment? And now one's going to say, well, wait, you advantaged him, not me, kind of thing.
So that led
How
into,
often do they change? Has it changed once every 10 years or so?
It could be, it depends, it varies based on the studies. It could be 3 years, it could be 10.
yeah, depends on how fast we get flooded.
Yep.
But then grandfathering, if there is a property that violates it today, that everything's already in place, are you suggesting to grandfather those?
Those would be automatically under lawful non-conforming until you remove 50% of that structure or 50% of the value.
So do we make note of that anywhere so that some residents wouldn't automatically start to panic?
It is
I
in the
think that's-
non-conformity sections of the
Okay.
ordinance. Yep.
Yeah, that is one of the things we actually discussed in our meeting as well. So if you're going to come in, for example, and start doing a whole bunch of work, you're going to have to bring everything up to conforming. And one of the things I think you might be getting to as well is raising seawall heights, right? Well, the nice thing about this is it makes it pretty clear. Not that I'm saying you want to go incentivize residents to raise seawall heights, but this probably will incentivize some residents to raise their seawall height. And the reason is you just made it easier for them to have a little bit bigger
More.
cap, a little bit bigger dock, maybe modernize their backyard a little bit, less uncertainty around what they can have there. Well, if you're gonna do the work, you might as well do all the work at once, and raising a cap's pretty easy. Put a few forms around it, tie some rebar into the old cap, pour some concrete, and you're good to go.
So as far as the walls go.
Not that easy. Sorry, not that easy.
Well, hopefully
Sometimes.
they're getting a bigger boat, so then they really have a reason to make the changes. But as far as the walls go, how much do the buttresses change the dynamics of, extending the dock?
Not sure, clarify the question.
Because some of the walls are just a vertical.
Yep.
Girders or whatever, and then you put on the buttresses. Do they structurally change the nature of the dock, or what you can do with it?
They don't impact the dock at all. The dock is actually attached,
It's on
whether it's a
top of it.
concrete dock or a wood dock or HPDE.
Some of the
dock.
buttresses don't go up to the dock, is what you're saying.
No, they go into the bottom of the
Right.
seawall cap. Now,
Okay.
interesting little phenomenon. So original walls were built with only the vertical piles.
Right.
Then what they did is they used something called tiebacks, which they would use steel rods that went underground. And then they put like a big concrete block at the end of it to basically pull on it like a tug of war. Except the metal tie rods decay over time. They corrode. So they end up going away and then the walls start pressing out. So the angled batter piles, or the dead men, some people call them, they're set at a 30-degree angle generally. And they were there to stop walls from going out. Now, you don't see them in Highland Beach yet, but you'll start seeing them. There's a few in Boca Raton, but now there's a whole new kind of wall that's becoming very popular called the true line wall. And it's done completely differently. It has no vertical piles. It has no angled piles. It literally is a sleeve that's pounded into the ground. It's PVC on either side, which is nice because if you bump your boat up into it, you're not damaging your boat, unlike when you run it into concrete. The rebar goes inside, it gets pounded into the ground, and then it gets filled with concrete, and it doesn't even need the angled batter piles. It's a lot more expensive. It's about $1,000 a foot. So, but it looks nice, and I'm sure the price is going to come down. You will start seeing more and more of those kind of walls being put in.
Okay, so that's interesting. Outfall pipes. I'm always concerned about pollution in the coastal waterway and all that. Any concerns about that in the course of all of this? Doesn't interfere in
They
any
are
way?
where they are. So I mean, I think the biggest thing we have going on is we're replacing the outflow caps, right?
basically putting in tiebacks, what are they called? Tide flex. So basically the water doesn't back up into the
Right.
neighborhoods, but you won't be getting more outfalls, but the ones that we do have, we need and will probably be protected.
We have to do that. I definitely agree with that. Bladders. I cannot believe that you can go for such a long stretch with no ladder at all. I mean, and clearly we've had some issues with safety on the intercoastal. You gotta have ladders. So I
Seems
totally
obvious.
support that. I can't believe it's gone on this long without ladders. I think the only other, no, I guess that's it for me. I just appreciated the education. I wish I had a boat to worry about. I will say this, the turbulence on the intercoastal is so crazy these days. I don't know what person would leave their boat in the water if it's on the intercoastal versus the canals, right? If it's on the intercoastal, that's gonna get banged. So they're gonna have to lift that sucker up.
Yeah, I actually don't think there are really any boats on the direct intercoastal
Yeah, very
in the
few.
speed zone.
Yeah.
The turbulence is getting better though. Kudos to the police boat. I've been out the last few weekends and it's getting slower and better.
All right, chief, you always find a way to get.
Shameless plug.
Very good. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Hi. I don't remember where I read it. Someplace in here, I read something about superstructure and something not being able to be higher than the superstructure. Where, first of all, what did it refer to, but also where do you start measuring the superstructure? Do you measure it from the top of the keel and then up, or?
You're talking the boat superstructure, not the accessory marine
Right, the boat
superstructure.
superstructure.
That's a good question. Ingrid, do you have an idea of where we measure it from?
Yeah, the superstructure of the boat, right? That's part of the definition of boat lift in section 30-131. Right, the lift cannot be higher than the superstructure of the boat when lifted. The code doesn't define what the superstructure is, but typically it's that top part of the boat, the canopy, the highest part of that boat is the top of that superstructure. Whether there's a canopy or some other contraption up there, that's the superstructure.
No, I understand that. What I'm asking is where you start the measuring of it to determine how high it can be lifted.
Again, the code doesn't call that out on plans that we've been reviewing. You know, typically they'll provide the dimension from the dock is typically how it's called out. Or, you know, NAVD, we use that vertical datum as well.
Ingrid, is there something where the bottom of the boat can't be a certain distance?
Right,
higher than the seawall?
that's correct. That's also part of the definition of boat lift. It says the bottom of the keel of any boat shall not be hoisted greater than 1 foot above the minimum seawall elevation.
The minimum seawall
Yeah.
elevation.
Right.
Ah.
Actually, I'll check real quick,
Well,
just
Well,
a
that works
recent
right there.
boat lift that we got, just to see.
Yeah, because some boats, you can have a half tuna tower. And that raises everything up, and you could raise not even necessarily a huge boat, but a 35, 40-foot boat. It
Right.
can block everything
Yeah.
when it's out of the water.
The
They're
sun.
huge when they're out of the water.
Right, and currently, right, the code just says the lift can't be higher. It doesn't talk about the height of the superstructure. Right, there's no maximum threshold for that superstructure.
Because even going with the picture that was up there, that was like higher than the house.
I'm not a good drawer.
I don't think that was the scale.
It wasn't the scale.
If I could just touch on one thing about, Mr. Bobby had mentioned the jet ski lifts, that they have been turned down because some of them, you know, the lift is actually higher, and the code doesn't allow that. What applicants have been doing, we had 2 circumstances or 2 property owners that actually went through the variance process in 2020. So they got a variance to allow the lift to be a little bit higher. They dimensioned, you know, what I think it was like 2 feet something. So there is a variance option in the code. The code allows a variance for dimensional requirements. So just wanted you to know that there is an option for those jet skis now. Again, you have to go through a
What
separate.
would you, I agree that
Yeah.
jet skis should not be limited based on the lifts for a boat. What would you recommend that people do for jet skis? is.
Well, again, as we indicated in the staff memo, you either exempt them from the definition of boat lift or, just possibly get rid of the language that the lift can't be higher than the superstructure of the boat. There's two ways to approach it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think that they should be dealt with differently because you don't want to get rid of the other, the language for a boat. that
Right, for the
can't be
larger
higher
lifts,
than the
exactly. So maybe it's just a
superstructure.
matter of exempting them from that
Just
definition.
exempt them.
Yeah. And oh, I wanted to know, how wide is a normal dock?
I think we had we have a table in your packet here. This one here, I think it had. On page 39 of your packets, there's a little boat lift table, but I don't think there was a reference to width of the dock. It was more about recent boat lifts that have been approved or denied for that matter, how much they extend into the waterway. Maybe Mr. Bobby can give you a little bit of input on that.
Guess it depends on how old your dock is. So they used to make them 3 or 4 feet. Now they're more 5 feet because 3 feet's a little tight for ADA. Actually, I think 5 is now probably the ADA requirement.
Okay, yeah, no, because I have memories of walking on very narrow docks and walking gingerly
Of course.
out of Finger Pier. Okay, and in this chart, why would they have 0 pilings? It's,
Which chart is it? No, but which chart are you talking about?
because there are a couple that have.
Yeah, there are a lot of different types of lifts.
Yeah, this is it.
But
Elevator.
if you want to break down lifts, traditional lifts that most people will purchase, they fall into 2 categories. Lifts with pilings, 4 or 8 of them. And you can think of it as like a hammock. You've got 2 trees on either side and the lift in the middle, right? We'd have 4 pilings in total, or 8 pilings in total, 4 on either side or 2 on either side. Or you can have what's called an elevator lift, or some people also call them a side mount lift. And that's a lot like the batter pilings. Let's take large I-beams, let's bang them into the ground at a 30-degree angle. Let's just have it ride up and down like those motorized chairs that go up and down stairways that you see on the old TV commercials at 2 a.m. kind of thing. Those are the 2 types of lifts. So if you have an elevator lift, it doesn't have any pilings. It's just 2 I-beams and then a cradle attached to it. Now, they actually don't even have to be angled. They can be vertical if they're not holding too much weight.
My if memory serves, when they had 8 pilings, usually they're 2 together
Correct.
at each of 4 locations.
Yep, they're
It's
not
they're
equally
not
dispersed.
spread out,
They're 2
yeah.
and 2. Exactly. It's a lot like truck tires on an 18-wheeler.
Right, okay, because otherwise I can't imagine how people would get their boats out of that area.
Yeah. Well, you'll go on forward and back opposed to coming on sideways. On a side mount boat lift, you could go forward and back to get on, or you could float on sideways. But for a lift with pilings, you have to either come in from the front or come in from behind, not from the side.
Couldn't that be difficult with only 20 feet in between? I mean.
That's
if
the
you
tightest you're
had-
going to be able to do if you're a resident, and that's a great part about the planning board and the marine consultant and Ingrid and Jeff. If you have a boat lift and you're planning a 40,000-pound boat lift for a 40-foot boat, you're sure not going to want to put it right at the edge of your property because you're not going to be able to get it on or off.
Yeah, because
Well,
That-
let me clarify
that
that.
doesn't allow a lot of maneuvering
Yeah.
room.
Let me clarify that. You wouldn't want to have it at the wrong end of your property. So if we had a property like the drawing we had up there, and we had a 40,000-pound boat lift, 40-foot boat, we might shift the lift to one side of the property so we can back off it into our own property. So maybe we have 60 feet before we get to the neighbor's dock, opposed to 20 feet. But you're not going to turn the whole thing around 180 degrees and go the other way when
No,
you're
because-
backing off into your neighbor's property.
Yeah,
But again, this is a
because-
great part of the planning board to say, look, what you're doing either makes sense or no, that doesn't really make sense.
It's not that you can turn the wheel and kind of come at an angle. Boats don't function that way. Okay, thank you. This is very helpful.
Peg, all yours.
Thanks, Mayor. I want to thank Greg and Ingrid and everyone for working on this. This is a very complex issue. I'm sure we're not going to nail it down on our first go around, but there's a lot to consider. You're talking about everything from kayaks to 80-foot yachts. So what I don't want to become is like Fort Lauderdale or Hollywood, where boats are strapped side to side and, you know, take up the whole waterway. And on the other hand, we have to weigh the rights of the boaters and the rights of the neighbors and do what's common sense and reasonable. So this is a really great report, and I think we can tweak it and work on it as we go along. I have some like 5 points if I can ask about, Greg and Ingrid. We do not currently have a code for obstructed view of adjoining property owners. And I know this has come up in my neighborhood and on the ocean and on a few townhouses. So we don't have that for trees or shrubs, or I think just the side setback would cover like putting a hut at the corner property line or, you know, a place to store your lawnmower, whatever. So I don't know if we need to take a look at that now while we're looking at docks just 10 feet back on a setback, because for your, you know, I know it wasn't to scale up here in your photo with the little box, but you could have on 100-foot property, 10 feet away, a large yacht, and the next door neighbor could probably lose 20-30% of his view. So I think we have to think about that before we move immediately forward.
And you could have that now, right?
We could, right?
Yep.
So.
Because I think one thing, and sorry to cut you off, but
No, go ahead.
I think one thing to be very cognizant of is waterfront property. Most owners want to use the waterfront.
Of
So if
course.
you have a 90-foot property, a lot of times people buy that because they've got an 80 or 90-foot boat.
Correct. Now, in Delray, if you boat north, there's just past Linton Bridge, there are several homes which had, whether owned or borrowed or whatever, a good 60, 70-foot yachts. And if you remember a year ago, they were just packed in there near the gas station. And it was amazing. You probably couldn't see 3 or 4 homes for the yachts in front of them. Now that's because there's a no wake zone there, so they can drop in without a lift. While we still have our wake zone, that won't be an issue. But if that were to change, you would be talking 3.1 miles of new possible yachts stationed right in the intercoastal with not having to be on a lift. So I don't know where that's going to weigh in, but we need to keep that in mind. Regarding 4 years ago, I know the planning board was looking at a big plan to keep the boats from appearing too high, which you've addressed, but some of the plans actually put the screw of the boat in the water full time. So is there any kind of, do you see any way to avoid that? Because I know I went out and did some research on that. You can't keep the screw in the water a good portion of the time or you lose your engine. So is there a way to handle that with your report?
The elevations that we talked about, the base flood elevation plus 7 feet, unless you have some sort of really odd boat, you're going to be able to get it out of you'll be able to get all of the superstructure out of the water, whether it's an inboard, an IO, an outboard. I mean, that's a pretty, if you think about it, you're taking the boat up to about where the seawall cap is. If you have a lot of components of the boat in the water, your seawall cap must be really, really, really low. Like your backyard's flooding all the time.
Well, I don't personally have that, but I know some people haven't raised their seawalls much. So I think we need to think about that. I don't know how to handle that within this code, but not everyone's raising their seawall right away. And there were times at high tide, the peak tide's April, October. We were going around looking in that April 4 years ago, and there were a lot of boats with the screws in the water, which again, isn't so great. So we need to keep that in mind. I don't know that we can force people to raise their seawalls, but if we have this code, it might keep their outboard in the water. So I just want to be aware of that. I don't know.
Clarify that. How would it keep their outboard in the water? Because if if we do a 4-post lift or an elevator lift, any sort of these sorts of lifts,
Mhm.
with the top of the lift being able to be base flood elevation plus 7 feet, there was a lot of debate around the Touchette lift, for example. And the elevation that came out about was pretty close to what we're calling as the maximum. That was pretty high.
Yes.
Okay,
So
so-
if you've got a boat that is that tall where any part of it is in the water when that lift is fully retracted, that's gonna be a boat I've never seen before.
Okay, so you think it's a rare occurrence?
I mean, that'd be a boat with 13 feet vertical side.
Got it. Okay,
That's
just want to be
massive.
aware of that.
Yeah.
That's something we want to
I think
avoid.
you're gonna have like 4 or 5 or 6 feet between the difference between the bottom superstructure of the boat and where the water is at its average tide.
Okay, good. That would be great.
And you're right, you do want to get as much of it out as possible environmentally.
Right. Well, that's
Anti-fouling
true
paint's
too.
not good for the environment, neither
No.
is leaving any metal in.
That's absolutely true. We have to be careful also in moving forward because the width of the canals does vary quite a bit. And you've got the 2 lakes, the river, the Spanish River, the canals, side canals, and the intercoastal waterway. I do know there's on the North Lake of Bellito, there is a new structure that's been installed. And I believe if you put the same structure on the opposite side of that entrance to that lake, you could not get a barge in there. So I would like to take time and have staff and us check the actual sizes of the canals and openings. There are a few which I honestly don't see how. I think it's set at 25 feet. I think it's the one listed here.
The maximum 25 feet or 25%. We actually spent a lot of time with that property.
Okay,
So
you
yes,
did?
it's a
Okay.
great idea to have staff check it. That was one of the ones we use as an example, because it's a very complicated property. It runs around the
Yes,
turn a
it
little
is.
bit.
Mhm. It's like
And
a
I didn't give you
half-moon shape.
every little piece of minutia when I gave you my summary, but it's in the paperwork. We do things like extending the property line into the water for when we're doing measurements. The closest property is where we measure to when we do the 25 feet or 25%, whatever is less. So when you get 2 properties like that where they come together, we're not measuring it from the wide part, we're measuring it from the tightest part of any 2 properties. And then
Got
you
it.
do the 25 feet or 20%,
Got it.
25%. So that was the whole, that was actually one of the examples. We said, okay, well, let's test our little theory here. We came up with these parameters. How well does it work? This is one we faced that was tricky.
Got it. How are you stating you extend the property into the water? Are you talking on the false like extensions of decks?
Wherever the property line is, yes,
Mhm.
you continue to extend the property line out into the water, whether you're measuring the side setbacks or, so like we do a dock and it's 6 feet further out, right? We got to
Yeah.
recognize that property theoretically extends past to where the back property line is. So we don't want anyone playing any games with, well, that's not where my property goes kind of thing.
Okay, so hang on. So you're saying the seawall is not any more the property line, water side?
We're measuring everything from the property line itself.
The
not
actual
the seawall.
The earth,
The property line as on,
the dirt, rock, rubble, whatever the home.
as on the tax maps.
Got it.
The
Okay, thank
property
you.
line pin. And there's a reason for that too. And one other little nuance in here, which I didn't go through, is we also don't want to encourage over a decade or so residents to constantly build a new wall outside of a new wall outside of a new wall. And hey, let me see if I can get my property to be about 10 feet longer kind of thing. So you can build one wall. If you have a really old wall, you can build one wall outside of your existing, but that's as far as we're proposing. And if you want to go beyond that, start pulling out old walls to put in new walls. Because the last thing we want is if you're measuring everything from a point in the wall, whether it's the wet face or the outside of the cap or whatever it might be, you're encouraging to have residents put as wide as possible structures in place to get a little extra backyard just for the sake of gaming the system. So let's just all use, we know what the property line is. It can be very easily verified at all times. We don't have to have any sort of games played around, oh, I want to put this in instead of this.
Well, I have to say that's brilliant because that also brings in the submerged lands issue and how far, if you extend 3 docks out, how, you know, who owns the land under. So that is terrific. I appreciate. That was a big question of mine. A resident had written that we are not addressing floating docks, which is how do we need to, I think we all got copied on that. Do we need to discuss this or will this be a
Well,
separate
that was the
issue?
other elegant portion of the 3D box.
Right.
Because right now the code's a little nebulous on that. But if we're saying every apparatus needs to fit within the 3D box, that counts floating docks too. Counts floating docks, floating vessel platforms, sea pens, whatever they come up with in 2028, whatever you want.
Right, right.
It's in the box or you need a variance.
Do we need to write that in? And do you think that we need to really specify? Because I think people are confused. And as you know, you're saying, and you know more than we
Yeah,
do.
so our way of
technology
addressing it
changes.
is, we'll have to just clarify that it's everything, because this is what's happened to us in the past. We name things like an elevator lift, a 4-post lift, then they come out with a floating vessel platform. Okay, let's name that. Now they come out with a sea pen. Oh, we didn't name that. Now we got to go name that. How many, and we're gonna be chasing our tail for the
I
next
see,
150 years if we must name it for it
I
to
see.
be.
So we'll
The
use.
easiest thing is,
I
here's your
see.
box.
Got it.
We've got your box. It's good if it's in, it's bad if it's out.
Got it. Okay, that's great. That's all for me for now, but thank you again very much. It is
Sure.
very complex. I really would encourage us to get somehow the widths of the canals and all of that, so we know what they are moving forward.
Sure.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, so thanks for this. I do think it's critical we get a lot of resident feedback on this.
Of course.
I'm sure there are lots of different opinions and I don't know that we could cover it all. I guess one question I had, so the box talks about basically above the water, right? It's the box above the water. Is there any reason to discuss the depth? So like if somebody has to dredge or, you know, something like that, how does that come into play with all this?
Yeah, no, look, that's a great question. Do we have anything on for dredging?
Okay, as far as dredging, please be mindful, this is specific to accessory marine facilities. So the code very clearly defines what those are. And I'll be happy to state that just for the record. So dredging would not be an accessory marine facility.
But what if you had to dredge in order to do an elevator lift? Like if right up against your seawall, it wasn't deep enough because of erosion or whatever over time, and you had to dredge in order to get your elevator lift.
Depth to get your water.
Right, to get, so at low tide, your elevator lift has to go deep enough into the water at, you know, peak low tide to be able to get your boat off. Because what happens sometimes with erosion, this, you know, stuff comes up and then your elevator lift can't go down far enough. And so, you know, or you want to put in an elevator lift and it's just not deep enough up against your seawall.
I mean, I'm not familiar with the boat lifts that have been recently approved here the last 2 years. Just checking with the building official that.
Yeah, because
once they got a permit that there was an issue with dredging, that you can recall.
It's a separate permit.
Yeah.
It's a
So-
separate permit with the DEP to dredge. Yeah.
DEP handled that.
And just for the record, again, I wanted to provide the definition of, not so much a definition, but section 30-68G of the code calls out what are accessory marine facilities. This includes docks, piers, launching facilities, boat basins, freestanding pilings, and lifting and mooring devices. Just make that clear.
So to have an elevator lift, it has to be deep enough. So I guess I just say, can we add that to your list of things to consider? Because I think for some of those accessories, you need to have a certain amount of depth in order to get them installed. So I don't know how it fits into the whole ordinance and approval
Yeah, we can take a look at
process.
that.
What I was going to suggest is, much like how in certain parts of our code, we just refer to the Army Corps and just let it run. Dredging might be a similar sort of thing. So maybe we should look and see what other towns do.
Yeah.
Do other towns also say, yes, you need a DEP permit and you need a permit from us? And if so, maybe we should mimic the same thing.
That's it for me.
That's it.
Mhm.
You had something else you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, because part of it was the floating dock. I don't know what the tide difference is here, but I know up north it can be substantial. And we always preferred a floating dock over to a set dock, because if you're gone for a week, your lines are going to have a problem and your boat can be hung up. So I want to know how we could deal with that. We used to keep our boat in the water all the time, but these were inboard motors. These were not outboard motors. And yeah, there were plenty of years that it never came out other than for a short while to have the bottom cleaned. So how do we deal with something like that?
So you're talking about tying up a floating dock?
Yeah,
talking
so that the dock isn't necessarily equal with the cap of the seawall. The dock could be lower because you're tied to it so that it floats up and down.
Sure, I'll give a quick answer, and I think Jeff wants to chime in as well. So most of the floating docks, actually all the floating docks that I've seen, they're not tied to the dock or tied to the wall. They pound posts and then they ride up and down posts, much like an elevator lift does. So the floating dock itself is a sort of a mini elevator, but instead of being used by power, it's just being used by tide. So you can't really pull it further away.
No.
You can't push it in against the wall. You can't shift it forward. You can't shift it back. And the larger it is, the more vertical piles they put in to have it ride up and down.
Okay.
And I just would like to add that, to remind the commission that we have a program in place already for floating docks, that there's minimum things that we could do where they're just, it's essentially what it is. It's an exemption certification application, because floating docks under state statute are exempt from our rules. So we cannot regulate floating docks. So if they build one that can fit 120,000 boat and it's a floating dock, then they can do that. They may have to pull a permit for electrical, but floating docks are exempt under state statute for the most part. So that's why we already have in place an exemption declaration where they're telling us that they meet the exemption, because there are some limitations from the state, but it's already by the state. And I think Marshall has some things to.
Yeah, I would just say, for the most part it is, but they do have to comply with zoning components of whatever we put in place. So they can't have it like right up against your property line. They would have to keep it in the box, but they could do it without a permit.
Yeah, plus the electrical, the pilings, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not, don't everybody run out there and put floating docks in. Okay. Give us a call.
Mayor?
Yeah.
It's Peggy. I had another quick question if I could. Yes, thanks. Something I just remembered to ask. When Marshall first came on board, the head of Army Corps Engineer came out and helped us with the project that was ongoing. It was like his first week on the job. This guy was great. He oversees all of Florida, Virgin Islands, Bahamas, anyway. And he mentioned that the fences that people have established that leave their property line and extend out over the seawall and into the water are unlawful according to Marine Code. And I just sprung up in my mind because the Marine Code calls for free access on land for boaters in distress, so that you could tie up your boat, dock, emergency. I don't know if we want to address that. I'm not promoting or disparaging it, but I'm saying it is something maybe we should take a look at. I understand what they're saying. It's that one, we've had 7 accidents behind my house in 25 years. So this is something we might want to think about.
I'm not sure if it's marine accessories or not. I'll leave that up to
Sure.
Ingrid and Jeff, but
Just to throw it out there.
give
so
us
y'all
direction
know.
where you want us to go.
Yeah, a couple of things, if I may. I think we do need to give serious thought on the obstructive views that you brought up. Either we deal with it or we say, no, we're not dealing with it. But I don't think we just ignore it. So it's something we, as a commission, have to talk about. I do think we need input from the communities that have all these docks. I mean, We obviously know where they are. Okay. I just don't think we ignore something like that. We need to make a decision, yes or no, we're going to deal with it. The other is, I noted it here someplace. I couldn't find it when I was thumbing through, but I noted it when I read through it the first time on neighborhood common appearance. Also something we need to decide, yes, we want to deal with, or no, we don't want to deal with it.
Neighborhood, what was that, sir?
Neighborhood common appearance
Oh, thank you.
throughout the neighborhood. It's something that we either say, no, we're not dealing with it. Each is unto their own, or yeah, we definitely want to deal with common appearance throughout the neighborhood. Again, I don't think we ignore these things. We make a decision one way or the other. The interesting thing about no more than one new seawall. I do understand not having people continue to build out, then they do become a peninsula. But the expense of not, just for everybody's information, when a new seawall is built, they don't remove the old one. They just put the new seawall in and leave the old one. They just build out. To put a third seawall in, they would then build out on top of the second seawall that went in. Seawalls last a long, long time. You're talking 30, 40 years. So we're talking about making a decision now for something that won't occur for 40 years from now. One, I don't know that we want to do that. And two, if we do that, I don't know that we want to tell people they have to remove an old seawall to put a new one in. It's a significant added expense. And obviously technology is going to change 30, 40 years from now. I'm uncomfortable doing that. So I think we want to think about that a little bit. Okay.
Can I share a thought?
Sure, please.
I have to respectfully disagree.
Yeah, sure. We do that often, you and I.
Yep. But, and I'll tell you where I'm coming from with it. If I were to put a new seawall on my property, 90% of the expense is the new wall, 10% of the expense is the old wall coming out. And a lot of construction companies will just throw that in for free. And the reason is putting something new in is very precise. Requires a lot of measuring, pilings in the right spot, a lot of focus.
Sure.
Pulling out is demolition. It's really easy. It's a lot like building a house. Demoing a house is a lot cheaper than all the fine work you put in. Some properties do put new walls outside of old walls. Yes, there are a lot of properties that actually pull out the old and then put in the replacement.
Oh, we're in the process of putting new seawall in.
Yeah.
That one section of our marina. And they didn't even consider taking the old one out. They just, no, we don't do that. It's B&M, you probably
Yep.
know that.
Yep.
So I was under the impression that it's not done. Now,
It's
I could be
it's
wrong
done
on
quite
the
often.
impression I got.
Yep, it's done quite often. It all depends on each town's code and how big the wall is going to be. And as you said, a lot of these walls are old. They're older than 40 years though.
Yeah, they go beyond that.
I bet my face of my wall is probably from the 70s.
Okay.
So we're talking, 50, 60
50 plus. Yeah. I mean, they last a long time. And I would hope the new ones last even longer, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to be for
And if you
us.
maintain them,
We're
they
not
do-
have
they
to-
do
We're
last.
going to have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know about making a policy now that people are going to deal with 50 years from now. Seems kind of like out there.
Sure.
The other comment I had is the 10 feet sounds right to me, but I would like to physically see it. I think the commission, well, you guys know because you live on the canals, but we don't. So I would think the three of us at least, and you're obviously invited, should make a little bit of a field trip. Maybe we come to your place or one of your places, physically see what 25 is, see what 10 and 10 is.
Yeah, I would say go
so
to
we understand a
spots in
little bit
Boca
more.
with 10. 'Cause I think to see the 10, you got to actually see where there's a true 10-foot setback.
Yeah.
Opposed to kind of imagining it. Hey, let's put a cone here. This is what it would be kind of
Right.
thing. I think.
And
it's
then
good
when
to
it gets
scale.
turned over to the planning board, we'll make sure the planning board physically goes. I don't want them making decisions without actually seeing it.
Sure.
Okay.
And then in terms of common appearance, I agree with you. Like that's something we tried to implicitly incorporate with the maximum heights everywhere, with the maximum distance a dock could go out from a property line. Because we thought about that, like, well, as you're driving down a canal, do you want one dock 4 feet further into the water than the other? Some for safety, some for appearance.
Yeah, I mean, I kayak through probably all of our canals and I'm totally with you on how far you can go out. Makes total sense to me. I just can't picture the 10 feet, that's all.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think we got to see it. Great job. I mean, a lot of work went into this. Thank you both.
Yeah.
Gentlemen.
I was gonna
out
say,
here.
it's,
That's great.
you thank me the least, thank Ingrid, Jeff, and Mr. Jenkins the best. They
But
really
they
gave some
were
great
talking
insight.
about putting up a new seawall. How does that affect your normal 8 feet for the cap and your dock?
So we can go through 2 ways of doing it. Let's leave the existing wall. Let's say we have a really old existing wall. No batter pilings, no nothing. We can build a new seawall right outside of it. We can do the fancy true line ones that are only about 8 inches thick. We can do a regular seawall, batter pilings and a cap. And the cap will cover both the old wall and the new wall right next to it. We'll put a little rock and.
So how
dirt.
far apart would the new wall be from the old wall? Not the technology you
Let's
talked about.
call it somewhere
traditionally.
around 24 inches to maybe even
another couple
30
of feet.
inches.
Okay.
So we'd be okay with the 36-inch cap. Because that's what we were talking about, is a 3-foot cap.
Right. Okay.
Now, remember, we're not, and then we do the dock outside of that. So, and if you really want a wider cap, I don't know, 40-inch cap, 42, well, go get a variance for it, because now you're really trying to widen the whole thing beyond what's pretty normal.
Okay, because we were talking about common appearance, and if you've got some original seawalls and some
Right.
new seawalls that are built outside of it,
But it also all,
there's not going to be a common appearance because it's going to be out a little more.
but it's still all within the 25 feet
Yes.
or 25%, whichever.
Whatever's less
Yeah, because it's all from the dirt.
Mayor,
from the property pins.
sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
question.
Sure.
When you're talking about common appearance, do you mean just regarding boats and boat lifts? Or do you are you regarding the entire town and community
No,
appearance? and so
boats-
forth? Or
boats
you're
and boat
just
lifts.
referencing the boating
Boats
community?
and boat lifts.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, great job and thank you. You'll have to follow this gentleman. He's already reserved first comments. Okay, are you ready now? Please. Okay.
Good afternoon. I thank you for this opportunity to comment on the proposed changes to the accessory marine facility ordinance. My name is Thomas Stevens and I live at 2358 South Ocean Boulevard, a single-family home on the Intercoastal Waterway here in Highland Beach. I am opposed to the town making these extensive changes to the existing ordinance, and most importantly, the proposed shortening of the required side setback of 25 feet from the property line. The current setback distance of 25 feet strikes a fair balance between neighboring properties. The current 25-foot setback allows property owners the ability to keep a boat on their property without unreasonably affecting the neighboring property owners' ability to peacefully enjoy their property. The new changes would disturb that balance, and they appear to grant boat owners an unreasonable amount of rights to build extensive docks, boat lifts, pilings that go to the sky to store boats and jet skis in the areas that would indirectly and directly intrude on the neighboring property owner's land. First of these intrusions are visual. Having to look at a neighbor's boat that up close to the property line is undesirable at best, especially in the case of the unlucky neighbor who is stuck looking at the engine end of the boat. Another intrusion, visual intrusion, would be the loss of view due to the neighbor's boat being so close to the property line. Another intrusion, a neighboring property owner would have to endure is being disturbed by the heightened level of noise from boat engines being so close to the property line. And lastly, neighbors being subjected to the possibility of fumes being emitted and drifting onto their property from a boat engine dock so close to their property line. That last example, I think, is important due to many people, such as myself, who suffer from asthma or other breathing issues, possibly having an attack brought on by the inhaling of engine exhaust from a neighbor's boat being so close to the property line. Any negative health conditions created by shortening of the setbacks should be of paramount importance to this board when considering any changes. I have spoken to a good number of my neighbors who live on the water in Highland Beach, and all but one, they all favor keeping the 25-foot setback in place as it currently stands. This would seem to be a good indicator that a shortening of the setback is not wanted or needed. For those supporters of these changes who point to other towns having less restrictive ordinance as a reason to change ours, I would point out to them that if your boating and docking needs exceed the current rules in place in Highland Beach, you are free to move to another town with rules that better fit your boating and docking requirements. In conclusion, I strongly urge the town to keep the setbacks at 25 feet. It has been a proven and reasonable setback distance that is fair to all property owners. Any change to the setback distance would create an unreasonable burden to neighboring property owners and negatively affect the quality of life that all Highland Beach waterfront property owners cherish. Thank you.
Excuse me, before you go, can you tell me where you live again?
2358 South Ocean Boulevard, North End.
North End. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Carl?
Just so the public is aware, the public comments is limited to 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. Dr. Carl Eric Johansson. I own a single-family residence on the Intercoastal. I'm here in opposition to the proposed amendment number 5, changing the 25-foot setback for accessory marine facilities for a single-family residence. I appreciate Tom's comments on what a burden it presents to the present owners who would have to endure this particular change. In anticipation that the 25-foot setback for accessory marine facilities now enjoyed by the existing waterfront property owners would become an issue, I met with town officials to discuss my concerns back in November and did some research that I would like to share. And I have those documents if you would like them. A review of all ordinances, a review of all variance applications filed from the year 2014 through 2021 found only 2 were with regard to the 25-foot setback from the accessory marine facilities. And under the guidance of the planning board, which acts as an essential check and balances, 1 was granted and 1 was denied. None of these applications were within the last 5 years. Just 2 years ago, an ordinance number 20.001, motioned by Vice Mayor Bobby, was passed and adopted on February 4th, 2020, included changes to the ordinance section regarding accessory marine facilities, but left unchanged the 20-foot setback required for accessory marine facilities. The quality of life that we have enjoyed, I have enjoyed, I've been associated with Highland Beach for over 45 years. It was 1975 I first came here. I've owned 2 single-family residences in Highland Beach. And I have put in new seawalls and new docks in compliance with the 25-foot setback, which affords me privacy, which affords me a view and in character with our Highland Beach.
Take all the time. Take all the time you need. sir.
Thank you. I would really request that the commissioners, I noticed on the next item following this is lessons learned, which I may have some comments, probably not, but maybe. Let's get the input, and some of you have implied that you would like the input of the waterfront property owners and see what the polling is, what their opinions are. I noticed the lack of documentation, lack of evidence in the documentation presented that no waterfront property owners were consulted. They had an input. There was no petition signed by X number of property owners that this would affect. No polling, no survey that was incorporated in the documents. I urge you to please not make the same mistakes as in the past, but incorporate the views and the opinions of the property owners that would be affected. We have enjoyed the view we have. At the 20-foot, my first home, my neighbor to the south had a boat lift and a large boat, but it was 25 feet away from my property. I enjoyed my time there. My second residence, a new home was just built north of mine. He complied with the 25-foot setback for his dock. And the one south of me does not have one, a marine facility. We've enjoyed our view. We are not bothered by the nuisances of noise, odors, which these facilities bring. I cannot emphasize enough that the issue of privacy is important. When you have a boat lift and a marine facility so close to the property line, there is a potential for personal injury and personal damage to the owner's adjacent property. I hope you consider all of these things and at the very least, do some kind of notification to all property owners that this is affected by certified letter and get their opinion, yes or no. Are they happy with the 25-foot or do they want it changed? Thank you for giving me this opportunity to comment.
Well, thank you for coming in. I will tell you, this is just the beginning. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something?
I wanna say something.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
David Axelrod. I was on the planning board for 6 years. I will tell Tom and Tim that we never were asked about the 25-foot setback. So my answer is, if it's not broken, don't fix it. That's the first thing. Secondly, obstruction of view, absolutely, please get it done, because that was the major complaint that we have. And then I have one question for Greg, is that are we talking about the 7-foot height? Would that be the maximum height of the pilings? Because that is a question that arose, obviously, probably the only one we ever refused to approve.
The base flood elevation plus 7 feet would be pilings plus any other apparatus. So sometimes, a lot of times a lift will sit on top of the pilings. So if your lift is 1 foot vertical, your pilings can only be 6.
Well,
So that's going to be
the
the
reason
lift
we're
inclusive.
asking is there was a case that we reviewed 12-foot pilings and we refused to approve it. And that's why I'm asking, should there be something about the actual height of the pilings in what you're doing?
And that's inclusive in there. That's the whole point of it. So it's the pilings plus anything that sits on top of the
Okay.
pilings. So, because
So
what you also
7
don't want is 7-foot pilings, then I'm gonna find a really tall lift that's another 3 feet on top of it. So if it doesn't fit in the box, it's out.
Thank you. And lastly, on everyone, lately on the seawalls, which was actually given to us recently by the commission to review. I believe the routine seawall right now is that must be for 4 feet, is that correct?
The
Right now, the
elevation.
seawall, the elevation of seawall? What's the actual elevation of
It's
seawall?
base flood elevation or higher.
Okay, because I know
It
we've
used to be
talked about,
6.
we've always talked, when I was on the planning board, we did mention, let's raise it up to 6 feet. That's what, and so I was wondering if at this point, that should be also included in replacement code.
I could clarify on that point. So I believe it was in 2021, I think it was January, I can't remember exactly, but we did change chapter 6 where you had the seawall provisions. The language was that the seawall has to be at 6 feet or higher, right? Isn't that the way it read? And the ordinance, I don't recall the number, but it was changed to base flood elevation or higher because as Jeffrey Remus indicated, a lot of these flood zones, right, are the base flood elevation is increasing. A lot of areas right now are currently at 6 feet, not all. There's a range, but a lot of the single family homes are at 6 feet pending 7. Those are per the FEMA firm maps. So currently, the way the code reads in chapter 6, it's base flood elevation or higher.
Can I just summarize one little last part and then
Of
I'll
course.
turn it over to you guys? I didn't think it appropriate to bring a lot of surveys to this because I didn't want to taint your view in any way. But a lot of my neighbors came and attacked me in a good way, saying, thank God it's about time this is happening. This 25 foot is ridiculous. So I got about 10 calls on it. So I think you should survey the residents. And I think you're going to have probably pretty strong opinions on both sides. But certainly that's one thing. Something else you could think about, and we didn't propose this, but you're more than welcome to think about it. Different setbacks for docks versus boat lifts, or docks versus any sort of other apparatus. If you want to have a 10 or 15 or whatever, 20-foot setback for docks to have longer docks and apparatus and different, obviously you guys are writing the rules. You can do it whatever way you want. And then the last thing is it's sort of moot points on the whole emissions and sound and everything like that, because right now you can have a 100-foot boat on a 100-foot property and your engine's right there at your property line. There's no restrictions for that.
Would you consider something different on the intracoastal than on the canals?
We didn't, but we're
I mean,
open to
they
your
are-
recommendations.
They are two different bodies of water,
Sure.
obviously.
You can also have vertical lifts on the intercoastal.
Say that again, please.
You can also have vertical lifts on the intercoastal. You do not
Okay,
have-
I'm going to repeat that because you're not on the microphone. Okay, David Axelrod said you could also do vertical lifts. on
Yeah, I
the
think what he's talking about is
intercoastal.
perpendicular versus parallel
Yeah,
to the property line. Sure.
perpendicular to the land.
Sure.
So it might be something for you to think about. I don't know if it makes sense, doesn't make sense.
Yeah, look, there's a few of them already. So we're looking for direction from the commission. You know, this was we didn't write any language at all for this. We just wrote concepts to give you the concepts.
Right.
Love to have you survey residents, love to have you get
Oh.
feedback, love to have you.
We're off to an excellent start.
And then just let us know where you want to go from there.
The controversy has begun. And Carl, we couldn't survey anybody because we had nothing to survey with. Now we have a concept and we will definitely gain input from those that live on the water. No question about it. Yeah.
Referring to the documents presented had no input and the will of the people was not expressed in the documents.
Right, and that was on purpose because this was just a working group of internals, and what we didn't want to do is present a bunch of documents where we had 20 residents come and say, we want 10-foot setbacks.
Yeah,
We thought
but-
it'd be better to present it as neutral first and
Yeah,
then see.
But now there are a number of questions in here that we can go to the residents with, not with, a write-up like this. We'll synthesize it a bit and come out with what we think are the salient points that need to gain input from. And this is a very big subject. It's a lifestyle subject. And it doesn't affect everybody in town. It affects everybody that lives on the water in the town. So we'll isolate them. We'll gain their input for sure. Absolutely. I'm glad you came in and brought up your points. David, not so much, but. Yeah. Right. Anybody have anything else of Greg while he's here? No, great start. You got us thinking for sure.
Is
Yeah.
this just for single-family homes?
No, this is for
Single and
anybody on the water.
multifamily on the waterfront.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean,
I mean,
there are
there's lots
condos
of
on the
things
water
that-
with docks, so.
It's a problem now. I mean, like we have a marina. And if you buy a home or an apartment on a marina, it's a marina. You're going to see boats. And if you're on the first 3 floors, say, and the boat isn't on a big lift, it's just there, it's still going to block your view
Well,
because
that,
it's a boat.
but this doesn't apply to like a private marina.
The planning board right now has 2 people who have boats. Okay, I'm sorry. Who have boats, plus they have several people who are also from your condominium that are on the marina, on overlook the marina. I would highly recommend that you pass this on to the planning board for further review.
Thank you, David. So what I'm saying is those condos with marinas, this doesn't apply because they're private marinas. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Great start. We're off and running.
Excuse me, Mayor?
Yeah.
I just want to ask, I'm not sure that that's accurate because your marina does feed into the intercoastal and the Army Corps of Engineers does have precedence over all waters in and out of the, I'm just saying, I'm not sure. I think we need to check that.
Actually,
For
Peggy,
example, we don't allow boat lifts in our
Right.
marina. We've grandfathered a few that are there and that's it. There are no.
Oh, is that why? Because I've seen the
yeah,
lifts.
but
Okay.
also,
That's in your documents?
Yeah, we just said no more boat lifts and that's it.
I see. That's what I didn't
That's a new
understand.
marina policy.
Okay.
one of the side canals, all of those docks are privately owned.
Yes, I understand. Okay.
Yeah, so
I
that's
just didn't
not part of
understand
our-
your
So
marina. You have
that's not-
documents that apply. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Can we close this subject out? You have something on that?
Can't close it just yet. Got to
Go
talk
ahead.
about process. So where do we want to go from here? So I've got everybody's input. Would you like the internal group to scratch through a few more, refine it, come back again? You ready to kick this to the planning board? Do you want something in between? Now, that's the discussion, is what are our next steps in moving this process along? Again, you have the generalized ordinance process as the last sheet of this agenda item where, you know, it gets introduced to the commission. So you can have us work on a few more things, bring it back to you when you decide you're ready to push it out. Things of that nature, surveys, resident letters, things, what's next?
I hate to admit it, but David had a good idea. Give it to the planning board. No, I'm not, I'm all serious now. I think the planning board can go through this, pull out some key points that we want input from the residents on. And then we can develop a mailing to those residents that live on the water. We don't need to mail it to people that are not on the water. And get their input.
Okay,
I wouldn't call it a survey because it's not a bona fide
correct. Statistically
weighted
valid.
survey. It's a piece to gain input. I'd make it as much as a closed questionnaire as opposed to open-ended. Put one open-ended question in, that'll do it. Okay, but let's gain their input and then we can formalize it with staff. Everybody comfortable with that approach?
Totally agree.
Yeah, I definitely think getting resident input
Okay,
is important.
so staff can start figuring out how we can identify those that live on the water.
Sure.
Okay. David, you might want to get back on that board just to do a little bit of work. Yeah, okay, we're good. You're good. You can still help out. Okay. All right, let's move on. Okay, I think we're on to lessons learned on the referendum.
Okay, I'll start the discussion on this. And
49, by the way, 49.
I want to start off with that my intention with this is to be very positive, to look forward on how we can improve the process for referendums. And I'm really interested in hearing everybody's input, the residents, the commissioners, on improving this going forward. So I guess some of the key pieces of input that I personally have heard is that this referendum repeated some mistakes of the past, that we didn't get input from the general public, that some of the key themes that are underlying the results are that the residents want to be more empowered as opposed to empowering the commission. I guess another key piece that I gleaned from the input that I've heard so far is the educational campaign perhaps could have been before we actually finalized the ballots, because what we did was the educational campaign went after we finalized all the ballot questions. So some observations I'll make is that there were no, public comments that were received during the charter review meetings. There were 7 meetings that had absolutely no public comment. I think we had 3 or 4 meetings at the commission level, and we also didn't receive any public comments. But then after we finalized that, we had a tight deadline, and then, where it has to go to the supervisor of elections. And then we began this very extensive education campaign. So I guess a key piece that I take from what we've received so far is perhaps we should have shifted that education campaign perhaps should have come before the finalizing of the ballots rather than after. I intend this topic to be something that we all chip in on, that we all work together. The other feeling I get from this whole thing is I kind of felt like it was a commission against the residents, whereas, we're all here to work together. I'm here to work together. I don't want to oppose anyone. I really want to reflect everyone's input as much as possible. And I think we're all feeling the same way. Another good piece of input, which is already surfaced, is getting the board's review of things. We have several really good boards, the Financial Advisory Board, the Planning Board, the Natural Resources Board. And I do think that's a good way to kind of get started with getting people's input. I thought it was interesting to look at the statistics, the data that came out of the results. So obviously question number 1, an overwhelming majority. The other questions were basically no, 60% no, 40% yes. The other interesting thing was I also wondered about how is our voter turnout? So our turnout is, we have like 3,900 registered voters, but 1,400 actually voted. And that's that's pretty consistent with at least the previous election, the November election. So the voter turnout for the March 2022 is 36%. So I originally was thinking that was kind of low, but the overall voter turnout across all the municipal elections for March of 2022 was actually 17% when you looked at all the other precincts. So we were really a much better turnout than other municipalities in the area. I do think when you look at our voters as a demographic, one of the reasons we have such a good voter turnout is when you look at the studies as far as who are the ones that actually do vote, they're usually the senior citizens, that are voting, and I think they also are very educated. They have the time and ability and the experience to actually, dig into the topic. So I just want to recognize that I think these 1,400 people that voted, I am going off of the assumption that everyone did, dig in. There was a lot of information that went back and forth. And I think that because of, the typical demographic, older, experienced, I'm assuming that everybody dug into the information that was shared and voted accordingly. So I feel like what I heard loud and clear is that the residents want to be empowered. They want to retain a lot of the control as opposed to empowering the commission. So I guess those are some of my initial observations. I guess for me, a key theme is getting the input prior to finalizing the ballots. But I think we need these voters and the residents to take the initiative to provide that feedback. So I'm really thankful for you guys that are here. So I don't know if we want to start. I'm happy to let Jack come to the podium and share his comments.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
So just for the public, this public comments is limited to 3 minutes unless
Okay.
the commission decides to let him go.
Okay.
Well, you said a bunch of things, and you had some good points there, and I think some points that are kind of off. I think the first thing for us is I remember texting with the mayor on May 31st. Actually, I went back and checked my text about selection of charter commission members. That was a big disappointment to a lot of us in town. I think we want to see people on these committees that we respect and we trust. And you lost that respect and trust by the appointment of this committee and how it acted and who was on it. And that was number 1, 2, and 3. Okay, in terms of education, is it education in terms of why the need and what's there, or is it education to sell the public? What we saw was selling the public, okay? I think there needs to be dialogue in advance. There needs to be an open communication. I know I had an extremely busy year this last year on personal stuff that I'm involved in. And if I had known where we were heading, I would have tried to get more involved earlier on. I think that was the question. And I think really the key for us was how this committee was set up at number 1. And then number 2, that it really got shoved down our throat. I remember weeks before the election, I was out on Saturday mornings and there was this 85-year-old guy walking with a cane. And I talked to him, I said, "Are you a resident?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Are you familiar with the election? You mean those questions they asked?" I said, "Yeah. Can I tell you about why we think you ought to vote no on 4 of those?" He said, "You don't have to talk to me. I just read them and I know I'm voting no. And a lot of people, all they need to do was just read them. They were against 12-year terms. When they saw no starting salary in the request for the raises, I'm trying to go off the top of my head now. I knew all those almost backwards and forwards, but they just looked at them and they knew that they weren't interested in voting for them. In terms of the numbers, again, I pointed out earlier in my talk, we didn't get started on our stuff for over 2 weeks after things had started. When you look at the disparity of the numbers, you'll see a much larger percentages of no's on the in-person versus the ballots, because a lot of those ballots came in the first 2 weeks before we even got started to making a point. I would submit to you that you would have had a much larger no numbers if we had both started out on equal ground, in a sense.
So Jack, can I just interrupt you?
Oh, I
for
just
a
want to
sec?
tell you one other thing.
Okay.
4 years ago, when we had the vote on the 45 or 50 million or 38 million, I hear all these different numbers, but what's a million here or there, bond issue? I think we had 2,100 people come out for that.
Good
And
turnout.
the election was 93% voted no. Those were 3 commissioners who were pushing that. So you say, trust the commission. There was a case, if we had trusted the commission, we would have been stuck with a $45 million bond issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and that was another part of our problem. If this $1.2 million project by project fee was approved, and that was back then 4 years ago, I could see it happening piecemeal over a couple of years, and we would have gotten stuck with it anyway. So that was another concern of ours thinking back to that point. Vice Mayor, you want to ask me something?
Yeah. So what I struggle with personally is I'm pretty sure you know the process of how all this governmental stuff works.
Kind of, John Ross, I have to tell you, as Dan said in his email to you, John knows more than I do. And
Okay,
he
yeah.
does. So I'm going to keep him on a short leash when he moves to Tampa.
Okay,
So I
but-
can get his advice.
So, okay, my point, I'll get to it. My point is, so I didn't know about all this until I started to get involved, but there's all this opportunity for public comment. You're here today for public comment. I'm pretty sure John Ross knows the process for public comment. We as a town know we have an issue with engagement and the resident and getting their input. I guess I am really struggling with why didn't the public come to the public comment
The 7 meetings,
for
the
7 meetings, 7 meetings plus R3. I'm not trying to.
Should I be
accuse-
more specific about what I was trying to say to
Yes,
you?
go ahead,
Because I was
please
trying to
do.
do
I
it
think-
nicely.
We need to be out in the open for sure.
Okay, you picked at least one person that has a reputation among the citizens of this town that we don't want to deal with.
Okay, so then let's focus on the commission meeting. So hopefully you like the 5 of us and you feel comfortable. I imagine you do, you're here. I think we had 3 or 4 meetings where we,
I can't comment on that. I can't comment. As I said, this last year was an extremely personal,
okay.
for me,
So
very
so
exhausting year.
the engagement of the residents and actually gathering, because I'll tell you, when we discussed these ballots, there were bits and pieces here like, oh, I don't know that people are going to like the 5% of the total budget. I got to tell you, I like the idea of a percentage of the budget because it changes with inflation. We won't be sitting with 8% inflation.
Yeah, but weren't there also loopholes that were discussed in the meeting? And it was asked about eliminating the loopholes. And I thought I heard from somebody else that the loopholes still stayed in, number one. And number two, it could be multiple projects in 1 year for that 5% as well. So now we're debating this, which we've already voted on.
Right.
So I'm not sure if this is bringing up something.
So I
but-
guess my point is, so some like I hear little bits and pieces of things like that. It's hard to know how much of that is actually the majority of the people feel that way. it's hard to know that the majority of when we were discussing these things, it's hard to understand what the majority, how they're actually going, how the majority of the people actually feel about that. Like, did the majority of the people, I did not know at the time of discussing the ballot questions that people were going to have such a hard time, because the language is the same as the charter. The only thing we changed with the proposal was just the 350. Instead of being 350, we're going to make it a percentage of the budget. So I guess I was thinking by not, by keeping it the same words, except changing the dollar amount, people would be okay with it. But we didn't get this overwhelming response when we were discussing, the final ballot questions, that was a real problem. So that kind of came as a surprise to me after we finalized the ballot questions, that was going to be such a big problem. And I'm really not trying to accuse people. We have a strategic initiative.
Yeah, but you have to understand there's history. Several years back, we had this commission, different people, but three commissioners on here, including one who was not even elected commissioner of the three, who went to ram this $46 million thing down our throats. Okay. We live with that. We have that memory.
So
and
you're
now
saying,
what you're saying is, okay, we're going to raise it to 5%, but we looked at it. We looked at the words themselves. They stood by themselves. We didn't look back at the charter.
All right, let me jump in here. The subject here is lessons learned.
Right.
And how can we do something better?
And that's where I would like to go.
So,
That's where I'd like to go.
This has gone far away from that discussion.
I agree
So
with you.
Let's try to back up here.
In terms of lessons learned, what I tried to talk about is getting more cooperation. If I wind up taking over CSHB, and if it stays that same name, who knows what it will be, one of the things I'd like to see us do is get more people involved in CSHB in terms of a board of directors or some kind of advisory committees to look at things and actually try to get people more involved. I actually had like to
How's
go.
that going to help future referendums?
Excuse me? Because what we want to do is reach out to you in advance and have more involvement pre-referendums as things are being developed and have people submitting, but also be involved in terms of selection of these charter committee people, instead of them being your best buddy at the condo or, somebody else, that we
Okay,
have
well,
people.
Let me tell you who was on this one.
I know who was on it.
There was one person from the planning board. There were two people from the financial advisory boards. There was one person was a past commissioner, and there was one
Mr. Mayor,
person-
I'm aware of who was on it.
We're
Did I
speaking
finish?
for everybody.
I let you talk for a
This
while.
is recorded.
Okay, okay.
Let me talk, okay?
Sure.
And the fifth and final person was a PhD with his degree in municipal administration. I think those are rather qualified people. Now, when you say you want your group to get involved,
No, I didn't say my group to get involved.
your organization to get
I would
involved?
love to have townspeople involved.
Oh, I'm with you on
Yeah,
townspeople.
we have a participation group with CSHB of 2,500 town residents. 2,500 residents.
Well, they
Here
are
in
not
town.
residents. Many of them don't even live in this town.
Okay, excuse me. People who come live a lot of, I have not done a survey, so
Okay,
you may be right on that.
I will.
That's one of
pledge
the
to
things
you
I'll
that-
learn.
I will pledge to you that we will have residents involved, not your organization.
I'm not asking for the organization to be involved.
Okay.
What I'd like to do is have our organization people be involved.
I will
That's what
pledge
I'm trying to
you
say,
that
Mr.
We will
Mayor.
have residents involved.
That I would like to see the people involved in the organization be involved in the town.
I'm telling you, we will have residents involved.
Oh, good. That is wonderful.
Okay.
And I'd like to see us work as a team. I mean, I definitely want to work with you guys. I think we all want to work together to come up with what we all want, a compromise with all because I think the other issue I have is, so we sit up here, we get to know all the details with, how everything works. There's like a tremendous amount of details and nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to sit through all these meetings. And I get that. And I think that's why we come up with a lot of the things that we come up with, because we are so deep in the details. So my issue is, okay, we get this resident input, and I've received a lot of input, and I really wanted people to kind of also see it themselves, because some of the input just can't be applied because it just doesn't work that way. So that's another struggle of mine, is I definitely want resident input, but people have to understand the rules and the procedures that we have in place for very good reason. So there's like a clash there of, it helps us govern better and more efficiently if we have higher limits. Okay, but the residents want to be able to vote on projects when they're significant, so that, just for an example.
Can I disagree with you? I don't think so. I would like to see higher numbers than that 375. I don't see anything wrong with that. But I think there needs not to be any, what was the term that used before, where you can do a project in December and then spend another same amount of the money in January on the same project or something like that. Loopholes.
Okay.
We'd like to see no loopholes, and we'd like to see some kind of limitation. How many projects in a year can you do at 1.2 million?
So I guess I'll ask your opinion. What do you think is the best way to get the majority, the input from the majority to?
I'll let you know. I'm just,
We're
I got
struggling
asked to get involved. And one of the things I
Right.
want to do is see what can be done better. How
Right.
can we function better
Right.
as a citizens group in this town to provide input to the commission and to work together with the commission? And I repeat, and to work together with you
Exactly.
guys.
And
And I'm not sure
agree.
what the best way is, because you got a lot of people who are very complacent till it comes down to the last minute.
Exactly.
And then they're out there. You look at the 2,100 people that came out 3-4 years ago with that 46 million. So,
Right.
and I think we need to figure out how to do it to get people involved. Okay?
Absolutely, because we are here every 2 weeks, right? People can come and give their public comment. So from my perspective, there's a lot of opportunities for people to come. But how do you do that? How do we?
We'll both work on it.
Okay.
We'll all work on it to see what can be done. That's all I can say to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
had
for
some
the
comments.
Thank you for the time.
To answer your question, the magic word of why people didn't come to the meetings here was pandemic. Probably the timing of this referendum was probably bad. To be honest with you, people were locking down, hiding and stuff like that. Granted, it was April, and during the summertime, people disappear, but the pandemic has an effect about, this is the most people I've seen. We've seen nobody in the planning board. We don't see anybody on the code enforcement board. Nobody was coming out. And in fact, I'll never forget the first time I had to come to a planning board and I was told I was going to have to come to the hall. I was a little nervous. I'm saying things that, so really that's the factor. The other way of getting more people to come in, you have a planning board, you have a finance board, you have other boards. Use those
Yeah, I
boards.
agree.
I mean, there are people who are in this town who don't care, who they didn't vote, okay? They didn't care. But I will tell you, in my condo, most of the people voted based upon their knowledge, not based upon, not based upon what they said. So I think you have to get out there. I definitely agree with you on one thing.
David,
Yeah,
David, I don't want to bust your bubble,
yeah,
but
yeah.
there's a fellow in my building that walked the sidewalks every day for 2 weeks prior to. He was also at the polls for probably 2/3 of the time.
Okay.
and he interviewed people, he talked to people. He was obviously on the vote yes side. Most people didn't want to talk to him, obviously. But he would go up to them and he'd say, can I explain anything to you? And they'd say, no. He said, well, how are you going to vote on the signing of the checks? You know, he would want to talk to him about one of the 5 questions. And they would say, what are you talking about? What checks? Well, they didn't know about that question. So he would ask them another question. They did not know the questions, yet they were
They
voting.
didn't open their mailboxes because take my word for it, the questions, I was bombarded not only by you, but by John Ross and his stuff. So we were bombarded. So there were both ends coming to us. So if that person didn't care.
It's not that person. 9 out of 10 people did not know the questions, yet they were going in there and they voted no.
Well, I can
Because
tell
we
you
see the
speaking-
results, we know it was 80-20 on the day votes.
Okay. Again, it's gone. It's over. It's history. And I think we have to look back at it again. And I definitely agree with one thing that the vice mayor said, educate before, not educate after. But again, that was difficult because
Okay, let
of
me
the
explain
pandemic.
one other thing to
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Okay. There are only 5 months out of the year that there can be a referendum. That's it. 7 months out of the year, we can't even have a referendum. So we're limited to 5 months.
Okay.
The questions for the referendum have to be submitted 95 days in advance. Now, if you want us to educate people, we have to educate before the questions are submitted. Now you want us to do it how many days in advance of the 95 days in advance of the 5 months that we can only hold a referendum?
Well, let me
That means
understand.
we have to make decisions a year in advance.
Okay, April 21st is
Can't
when
be
you
done.
assigned the board. Okay, April 21st of 2021. This was a year, you had a year. No, excuse me, no. When did you have to put in December? When did you have to submit for the referendum?
Yeah, it was December. Mhm.
December.
It was early
So
December.
you had and I'll tell you something else. If you look at that April 21st date, it's a commission meeting. Some of the examples used for what this review board should look at was the $350,000 change and stuff. That's in the 421 minutes of the commission and stuff like that. So if that's the case, then you had the time. I mean, if you start to think about this, then you educate. You can have I don't know how long it took the commission, Barry, maybe you can answer, to come up with your questions. Can you tell me how long it took from April when you were appointed?
It was about 4 months.
Okay, so April, we're now talking about August. So theoretically, you did have the time to educate before you had to hand in the thing. You had from August until December to educate or get some input because of that. Now, again, pandemic comes into play here. But you did have the time to educate the public before and get input before. I'm going to tell you something. I mean, to be honest with you, I know about this because I went back and looked at the minutes because I wanted to see this. I didn't know these dates that I'm talking about before. But to be honest with you, yes, I think there was time to get some education and input and stuff like that. To be honest with you, and I'll be honest, because of and I'm an active participant here.
So you're very involved now, which is terrific.
Yeah.
And there's no end to how much we all look to get better ideas. Where the hell were you when all this was going on?
Where was I?
Why didn't you go?
I was actively a member of every planning board meeting.
No,
I was a chair.
no.
Let me finish. I
No.
was a chair.
No, why weren't you involved in any of the meetings that the Charter Review Board had?
To be honest with you,
In
I
any
had
of our
no idea.
meetings when we were going
I'll be
through it?
honest. I had no idea when the meetings were or anything like that.
Oh, come
To be
on.
honest with you, okay? I'm being totally honest. I didn't know. And as you know, I tried to arrange a meeting at my building, but that was post
Yeah, I mean, you're
education.
very involved in everything.
Yeah.
I'm wondering why you weren't involved in this process.
And
Why I
this is so
wasn't asked.
valuable. I think this is tremendously valuable because people that
Yeah.
are
I wasn't asked.
involved didn't know. For what, and I'm not blaming anybody,
No,
but
you're always involved. It's
we-
great.
I agree, but I wasn't asked. I don't know how, each one of you appointed somebody, nobody came to me and said, do you want to take part in this? Whether I'm qualified to do that, I'm not sure. But the bottom line is, did anybody, I don't know how each one of you chose to pick the people that you picked, okay? I don't know, who's on the planning board? You said, mention one of the members is from the planning board. I don't know.
Eve.
No, Eve is not a member of the planning board. Eve Rosen?
Yeah.
He's my Fred Rosen's wife, right? Or something?
No.
Oh, no, I'm not sure,
Not
but
Fred
she is not
Rosen.
on the planning board.
Eve
The
is
only woman on the
Eve is
planning
not
board
on the planning
currently,
board?
right now, is Eileen Mendelson.
That she had to resign to be on.
She's on the Board of Adjustment and Appeals.
So she was never, we had no member of no member of the planning board was
What
on
board is she
the
on?
choice.
Board of Adjustment and Appeals Board.
Oh, sorry, wrong
So
board.
nobody from the planning
Okay.
board. And again, as I said, you could have come to, Barry came out, his group came out with things. Hit one of the other boards. The finance board should certainly have been involved if they have, I don't know if they have been, but should have been involved in a discussion regarding the different things. A lot of economic economy was there, everything.
Two of them are on it.
Well, okay. And I don't know how,
And I mean, this is spilt milk, but
yeah, I'm
what they
just saying.
recommend, they recommended 10%. We cut it to 5.
You know what? As I said, I voted yes on that. Why did I vote?
Okay.
But did you mention the safeguards?
yeah,
With the-
we did.
There was the education there of the public
Yes,
about not the safeguards
It was
that
in-
prevented that.
Some of it it probably was in the educational materials we sent out, but I don't know how many people read them or
I don't
digested
think,
them.
I don't
All
think
right,
it was.
let's move
'Cause
on.
I hate to tell you what I
Let's
learned.
move on. We got a
Okay.
long meeting. Thank you. Anything else? Yeah, I'm sorry. Anything
I mean,
else
I
you
don't
want on
know,
the
we can
subject?
continue. I know we've taken a lot of time. I don't know if you want to hear. Maybe we should let it settle and bring it back to another meeting and let us all digest all this or.
Okay, I was gonna do this during commission comments, but I might as well get it over with now.
Sure.
Personally, I was offended. At some point, voters have to take responsibility for who they elect. And I think it was horrible that no one ran against me because nobody was interested enough in coming out and running for this commission. The last 2 elections were unopposed. Why? If you want to get involved, run. Then you have a voice, but nobody came out. And as far as the $45 million project, which John Ross said was 54 million, obviously he can't add. This room was filled to capacity when every hearing they had where they discussed it out the door. So why couldn't those people send an email, send a letter, call up and give their opinion? You can't come because of the pandemic. Okay, I get that. I do. But nobody was involved. Nobody cared enough to get involved. So instead of listening, and I will tell you that I know for sure that after 2 mailers go out, everything else goes in the garbage. And maybe even the first ones go in the garbage with most people. They're not interested. They don't want to look at it. They see it. They don't even really read it. And they think maybe it's a real estate advertisement or somebody wanting to wash their windows, which you get all the time too. And they go into the garbage automatically. But why, if you trust me so much, why didn't you come talk to me? Our phone numbers are public record. No one cared. We discussed this and discussed it and discussed it at open meetings never mind the 7 meetings that the Charter Review Committee had, but we discussed it for months. No one, and it was in the bulletins. It said what we were discussing. You managed to read it and come here because you don't like the setbacks for the boat lifts. But you didn't come for that. So how in the world are we supposed to know what people are thinking if we can't get in touch with them? We don't have 2,500 email addresses. If we did, we would have sent out emails. And that's what you've got, is not 2,500 followers, but 2,500 email addresses, which is a very different thing.
Agreed.
Because I get those emails too, and I read them because I want to know what they say, but it doesn't mean I'm a follower. You know, people, I don't know what loopholes they're talking about with the 1.2 million, because in point of fact, we only have 1.9 million of unassigned reserves, which means less than 2 projects. After that, we have to go for financing. If we go for financing, it must go to a vote via referendum. It has to. So I don't know where you got this millions and millions and millions. And I don't know where you got the idea that we were first going to give ourselves $100,000 salary and then do 5% on top of it. Well, how do you do that if you can only do 5%? Personally, it's $600 a year. All of us combined, it comes to $3,200, maybe. I don't even think it comes to quite that. So $3,200 to go to referendum during a normal election, which means either the March or the November, costs $17,000. So you're going to spend $17,000 to be able to spend 32? Where is the logic in that? I mean, so a lot of the information that was sent out were just plain lies. They were absolutely lies. And when they were pointed out to the man who was sending them out, what he said was, I'm not a journalist. I don't have to check my facts and I don't care. That's what he said. And I find that objectionable. I don't mind if it's a fair fight. I don't mind if somebody comes up and says, I have a different opinion. Great. That's what makes the world go around. Differences of opinion are wonderful. We have differences of opinion. We don't all agree on everything. You know, the boards, they have differences of opinion. But it should be based on fact and not on innuendo, lies, dramatize things so that you grab somebody's attention because your taxes are going up. There was no indication that the taxes are going up at all. And not for nothing, but do you know that we are the second lowest millage rate around? People don't look at that. But, and how about the fact that this year we lowered the millage rate? So they don't look at that either, but you're telling them their taxes are going up with no information to back that statement up. This is all pulled out of the air.
Propaganda.
And it infuriates me that people didn't come and say something. There were multiple meetings. You could watch it afterwards because they're all recorded. The background information was on there multiple times. So don't complain now if you weren't there before.
Before Jack speaks, could I add my comments? Because I think it'll relate to what Jack's going to say.
Are you done? You finished?
Yeah, but you know what? I'm sorry, we are not
Put
supposed
your
to
thing-
have a back and forth. with
We're not
people
having a
making
back and
comments.
forth.
So
No.
this is not a back and forth.
No.
He said what he said. I said what I
Put your-
said.
put
No
your-
more back and forth.
Put your piece on.
No more, we are not supposed to have back and
No.
forth with people making comments.
We are not.
This is enough. You don't get to challenge it. You said what you wanted and that's fine. That's on the record. What I said, what I wanted is now on the record
Correct.
and that's okay.
Yeah,
Go, John.
yours, John.
Okay. I'm going to have a little different perspective because I spent my career 45 years in business. This was my first attempt to get involved in government as a result of John Ross and you, Jack. And you know the history. And because of the $45 million referendum, not the $54 million referendum, I got involved. That's why I'm here. But I am not handcuffed by the past. I am not restricted and living in the past. So from a personal learning exercise, I need to share this with you. And I have 5 specific lessons. But before I get to those 5 specific lessons that I learned, in hindsight, clearly something happened between those who mailed in their ballots, which had to be days and weeks in advance of Election Day, and the walk-ins. It was a complete flip-flop, right? From 80-20 to 20-80 against. So that is something I think we need to learn what happened. The Commissioner David brings up the whole point of FUD. In the last days, John Ross, and I hate the expression Committee to Save Highland Beach, and I would ask you to change
You
that
heard what I
name.
said, that I looked at the name.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I haven't even accepted to do
Okay.
that, but that's, yes.
I definitely think that FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, was created on a level that I've never seen before. Now I understand, and I never did. This is one of my big lessons for me personally, is that it's okay to lie. It's okay to exaggerate, distort, deceive, if it's the intent to use free speech to present a view that's not real, but it's intended to work against whatever the objective is. It's just, we see it in DC, we see it in Tallahassee, and we see it here. It is unbelievable, as Commissioner David has said, that the question says, as an example, I only give one example here because I can't take any more time, provide that the salaries of the town commissioners and mayor may be determined by an ordinance, but shall not be increased by more than 5%. Nowhere does this talk about how we're going to raise our salaries to $100,000 and then give ourselves a 5% raise. It's outrageous, but that's what was promoted as an example. Or that the loopholes were going to allow us to spend millions of dollars that would increase the taxes and send the whole city into bankruptcy. It was such outrageous stuff, because here's the point. All you have to do is to tell people who are not going to read the questions. They're not going to read all the emails. They're not going to go onto the website. They're not going to view our town meetings. What they're going to do is, wait a minute, are they going to raise the taxes? Oh, hell, I'm against it then. Oh, you mean these politicians want to raise their salaries? Oh, I'm going to be against that. So it's easy to just say no. It's just easy to say no. Why should I say yes to anything? Because I'm committed to keeping everything the way it is now. And I want mediocrity. I don't want excellence. Because as a business person, I look at what we tried to do as a commission, and we were looking at trying to bring excellence to governance. That's where my attitude was. I want excellence in governance. How do we do that? By not being handcuffed in many ways. By changing some of the charter rules, yes. But the biggest lesson is, for me, this adversarial approach was just impossible to deal with. I mean, John Ross was not somebody you could talk to with any rationality. He was just so committed to being so outrageous in these claims. And John, it's not true. Why would you say these things? His whole deal was to seek revenge. I worry, Jack, that you seek revenge against at least one person. We all know who that is, and it's very unfortunate because he's a very qualified, brilliant
No, I
guy.
don't seek revenge.
It was
I
a
will state that
revenge
now.
tour. You can't convince me otherwise on that score. That we got to agree to disagree. It was a revenge tour, but that's in the past. We got to put that behind us. The other thing is the ballots themselves. We're restricted on not only the time frame it takes to create the questions, right, and get those questions approved, and limited in how many words you can use. So it's a process, it's a science, it's defined, and it's required by law, and we tried to work it right down to the, can we take out 2 words here and put 1 word in here? It was ridiculous. I mean, I'm not used to that kind of limitation, but that's the reality of it. But when people can take a sentence or 2 of any of these questions and add a sentence to imply something that makes it outrageous, then, here's the other restriction we have. Again, very difficult. We can't sell the concepts. We can't sell the questions. We can't promote them. All we can do is explain them. That's it. In fact, now I understand the legislature has even just about to pass a law. Well, I think the legislature passed it. Did the governor sign it? He must have done that yesterday or today, right? In any event, now, it's against the law to do much of anything other than present the questions.
No, you can provide factual information.
But even the factual limitations now is limited.
Not by writing. So how do we get to people if we can't even send out a letter or an email?
All right, let's move this.
Okay,
in.
so-
First of all,
Okay,
this is.
Let me just
Time out.
finish with the 5
You
lessons.
take your time, but this is not a give and take conversation we're having here.
So the
Okay.
5 lessons that I've learned from all of this is that community teamwork was totally lacking. We need community teamwork, whether it was as a result of apathy or indifference. We did not get community teamwork. What we got was an adversarial approach to destroy what we were doing with good intentions, nothing less. Unfortunately, there's also this feeling of distrust that it's everywhere today. I mean, distrust is everywhere. And it's unfortunate because for the first time, this commission has been getting, I think, major progress from our camaraderie and our ability to get things done. The other part of this, the restrictions by law, is something that is really going to be difficult for us because we can't even provide emails reviewing the facts. That's a hard thing because anybody can say anything that's deceptive and we can't deal with it. We can't refute it. We can't go against it. No matter how much the lie is and how big it is, that's what we got to live with. Community outreach. The mayor has made an effort that I have not seen before for community outreach. There's coffees with the mayor, going to the presidents of the condo associations, sending out, yes, emails and explanations and so forth we've tried to do is something we need to do more of, but in a way that is more effective. Lastly, my own personal feeling is the reason why I'm sitting here is because I'm not a politician. I tell it straight. I tell it as honest as I can. I am not a damn politician. I'm a business person who's trying to do good for this town. That's it. That's the only reason. I'll have to admit, I had a huge problem with this one woman who said to me, to my face, "You're not worth getting paid anything. Nothing. I don't want you to have, you're absolutely not worth it." Number one. Number two, as in the case of checks, "Oh, I want to know what you people are spending money on." I said, "Wait a minute, we're talking about signing daily checks for things like the lights, the electricity, paying the bills, where hundreds of checks are being, I want to know what all that money's being spent on." So you want to approve the checks? Would you like to come to town hall and sit over the manager's shoulder and the commissioner's shoulder and sign and watch us sign these checks? She turned around and walked away. She didn't even realize what the question meant. So we have a real problem with people not understanding what we're trying to do. And without any trust, obviously they don't have trust, and with some degree of indifference and apathy, we're left with a commitment to mediocrity. And that's something I'm going to fight until I leave this position. I believe that in the end, we have a safe harbor here. The safe harbor in paradise is Highland Beach. In fact, I wish I had a bumper sticker that says, Highland Beach, safe harbor in paradise. That's what I want to retain. We have a chief with a police force that's doing a great job. We're pulled in the EMS and fire to make sure that it's doing the right job. We're doing everything we can to ensure our buildings are safe while lowering our taxes. My goodness, at some point you have to have some trust. That's where we're coming from, and that's all I can say. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I only have 4 short comments.
Excuse
Not
me, I
back
haven't
and forth.
spoken
They're gonna
yet.
have to
I haven't
wait.
spoken.
You
and
had
the-
your comment.
Excuse me.
There's a point of
Okay.
order here. We have to follow the mayor's right, and Evelyn. I have not even spoken. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank
Peggy.
you. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to say, you all know I was up here, I'm in my 5th year, and I was up here for the 2019 referendum, the 45 million. It was a terrible time. I was the new kid on the block, and I never want to go back there. And I had people I served with who said, oh, let's not look at the fire contract. We'll make Delray Beach mad. We'll lose. Wouldn't look into it for 2 years. And then we have this commission, and we're doing all the right things the best we can. No one else is challenging our roles. I'm in my 2nd term. No one ran against me. No one ran against Evelyn. No one ran against John. And none of us actually. So we're all here by the grace of God, I guess. No one ran against us. And so I added up recently the last 3 months of emails. I had 638 questions or problems and 1 thank you. And the reason I say this is I'm not sobbing, but I'm saying, give me a break. I mean, we're doing the best we can. We make negative 12 cents an hour, my husband says. You know, I bring home $273 a week after taxes for about 25 hours. So I make less than McDonald's in the minimum wage. And that's okay too. I didn't run for the money. I ran to sort out the town for the views that I needed, that I personally, professionally, and the town needed to have looked at. Everything. The beaches, the roadway, A1A, flooding, the fire, all these things we're addressing. The police boat. We talked about that in 2018. Now we have one. We've been lauded. When I go up to Tallahassee, people say, oh my gosh, you guys got a police boat in like 2 months. I can't buy a boat for 2 years, which is true. So it's hard for me to get up and come to work some days when I think like everyone hates us. The amount of money that we were offering, I wouldn't have gained, but I think $380 if this raise for the commission would have gone through. But my colleagues, Natasha, who's brand new, and some other people, Greg Bobby, when he served here, they're younger, they have families, they have a lot of brain power to bring. It's hard for them to do it for $278 a week for 25 hours. So that's like a no-brainer. Give them a little bit of appreciation. But the community, I think we have to get away from distrusting us. I mean, we really have tried hard to do the right thing. And if you turn on one meeting or read the manager's minute, Marshall sent out numerous manager minutes and data and on the website well in advance of the charter review. People could have come in. We had zero in here all last summer. So I just think that everybody needs to settle down. The emotional distress with these 5 questions was way exceeded the level that it could and should have. It was really, these were minor fixes. And I'll tell you one thing, 2 quotes come to mind. William Faulkner once said, memory believes before knowing remembers. And then, I mean, Simon and Garfunkel say, you know, a man believes what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. And that's sort of what happened here. I had friends call me and say, oh, how should I vote? And based on when I looked at the state law that says we should apply both the pros and cons of any of the referendum when we speak, I tried to follow that. I said, well, let me tell you both sides. No, just tell me how to vote. And I said, no. And so then I don't want to pay for the $350. And I said, well, that's fine. But look at the other side that 4 years ago, the side streets and the side street water lines where I live on a side street, as Natasha does, they were not repaired for 10 years because none of the persons on the commission then were on a side street or a single family home or a townhouse. and wanted to authorize over 350 to make those repairs. So if you're on a side street, you may not get your road paved right away. So I just gave that side of the coin. And then all of a sudden, oh, Peggy's telling me what to do. So I quit talking to everyone about it. It was just the easiest, simplest thing. We had data, we had information, but I promise you that the commission and Marshall did their best to get out information well in advance. And I would like everyone to put this behind them. I think we shouldn't discuss this again. I think we need to move on. We'll be glad to take public comment anytime, letters to the editor, but I think we have to just pack this up and put it away and try to realize that the people serving up here are making no money, spending a lot of time, and all trying to do the right thing. Maybe it's not perceived that way. Maybe you're remembering differently, but I just think we have to move on because it's very discouraging to have this stuff going on. I mean, I heard about it up in Tallahassee when I was up. We have a lot of things to be thankful for. We have state funds coming, knock on wood. We have a lot of great things happening. We have not had a storm for years, knock on wood. We have really great progress and all of us are committed and Marshall's committed and the staff. So please let's move on. Thanks.
I don't know.
Anything you want to add?
No, I'm good.
I tell you how I read this. Kind of the way you read it at the beginning when you started. The mail-in ballots showed about a 45-55 in favor of it all. And then the walk-ins showed about an 80-20 opposed to it all. So what it showed me was that the people that sat down in their homes and read the questions, understood the questions, gave it some thought, and 55% of them were in favor of it. After that, the negative campaign started up in great vigor. And they started to get things like stop the Highland Beach tax increases. They got things like question 4. Term limit. Wait, you say this means that the sitting commissioners will extend their term limit for themselves. Another one says, if passed, all our tax money and all our reserve tax money would be wiped out without a vote of the people. Another one, town commissioners would be extending their own term limits while they're still in office. Another one, current commissioners will decide how much to pay themselves. That's the $100,000 that they're going to give themselves. All misinformation.
Mr. Mayor, you can continue and go on. If this is what
my
you
turn
want
to
the
tack.
future to be.
This is my turn to talk, please.
Yes, of course, sir.
This one, taxes, 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 tax, all misinformation. And I understand stretching the truth, but I don't understand total misinformation and outright lying. But what bothers me the most is when I'm compared to Putin, when my associates and I
Tyrants.
are compared to people that,
Kleptocracy.
pardon me,
Called it a kleptocracy.
kleptocracy. If you don't know what that means, it's organizations, governments that enrich themselves at the expense of the residents. That's what he called us. No, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. So yeah, the people that were inundated with this information didn't do their research, believed this nonsense, and voted no. And again, many of them that were stopped on the way in to vote and were stopped on the street did not even know what they were voting for. They didn't even know the questions because they didn't do the research. They didn't read the questions. They just voted no. So your campaign and your associates' campaign was very, very effective. And obviously you believe that the end is just, or the means, or the end is justified by the means, or the means are justified by the end. I said it backwards. I don't believe that. And I do understand not liking the 5% of the combined budgets. And I understand a debate on whether it should be 4% or 3% or 6%. I get that, and I'm willing to debate that anytime. I don't understand the negatives on the other 4 questions. To me, much of that is housekeeping. And particularly the one on the ability for commissioners, vice mayor, mayor to run for 3 terms. Doesn't mean they're in for 3 terms, just gives them the ability to run for 3 terms. Actually, it was that way a few years ago, and it was changed to the 2 terms. And we were just suggesting it goes back to 3 terms. They still have to be elected. Okay, just gives them a chance to run. The other part of that question limits them to 12 years. Right now, none of us are limited. We can serve on this commission for life, just in different roles. So a lot of that's housekeeping. I just think it was easier for you to campaign, you and your associate to campaign, to vote no on everything except for one. And it's very unfortunate. But when one realizes that this commission obviously canceled the contract with fire with Delray, Peggy's been pushing for a number of years. Other commissions avoided it, didn't want to do the heavy lifting. We did the heavy lifting. We did the research. We found other alternatives. We approached it like a business because that's what it is. And obviously we're working heavily now on getting our own fire department up and running, and we'll do it. We'll get it on time. We'll get it done in budget. I've heard of discussions about improving our crosswalks since the day I came into this town 12 years ago. We did it. We have better crosswalks. Everybody's pleased with them. We obviously started an outreach program on communications, still needs to be improved, but we went from virtually no communications with the town to a communication piece goes out every single month. Recertification program started the very Monday after the fall down south of us. I was in Jeff's office. Jeff started working on it the day I left his office. Did a hell of a job getting that together. Boca brags about being the first town with it. Yeah, they offered it, they withdrew it, and then went back out. We are the first town with an operating recertification program. Great work, Jeff. We have Marine Division. Got it up and running in 3.5 months, unheard of. Boats out there already starting to slow traffic down. I keep hearing we're the best commission this town's ever seen. I hear that from people that have been in this town for 30, 40 years. I hear that from some of the people that work in this town. So if we're the best commission ever, why were the other 4 questions, why were they voted no? If we're that good. I don't understand. Again, I understand not wanting the 5%. Maybe it should be a different number. But I don't understand why the others were voted no. Doesn't make any sense to me, other than this kind of garbage that went out and the easy saying, don't vote for any of them, just vote for number 1. So my bottom line on it is real simple. The negative campaign has done a terrible disservice to this town. It's left the town with a lot of negative thinking out there. And much of the great work that this commission did in 2 years, and by the way, all this work was done during COVID. Can you imagine what else we could have done if COVID didn't hit? The first thing this commission had to do when a couple of us were sworn in was what? State of emergency and a hiring freeze. And then we had to go in and negotiate 2 union contracts, but that was the easy lifting. So yeah, we work kind of hard here. And no, I don't think we deserve this kind of treatment at all. I don't think we deserve being called on the carpet like we were called on the carpet with this kind of nonsense advertising. And yes, I think a major disservice was given to the town. And now there are 800 people out there that voted no, thinking that we, this commission, was about to give ourselves $100,000 raises and spend millions upon millions of dollars. And they stopped us. So they don't think very well of us right now. And that's because of the damage that you and your friend have done. Thanks for all the great work, Jack. I think we should skip the next one.
Are you complete?
I'm complete. You want to say something?
Yeah.
Make it brief.
A couple of things. I didn't come here to defend anything. I came here to try and throw an olive branch out. I've been asked to take over this organization. I haven't said yes because I need to see what baggage comes with it. And what you're presenting to me is a hell of a lot of baggage.
There is a lot of baggage.
Yeah, and I need to look at that and see where it's at. But being here in this town for 26 years and being a very active town participant, from Turtles when I first came here to 6 years on code enforcement, chairing that, 6 years on Board of Adjustment, chairing that. I even was on the environmental committee, but had to drop out. You talk about making money. I work with foster children. This last year, I finished off 3 of my cases, 6 kids, 2 adopted in Indiana, medical child to New York, and 3 adopted here in Florida. That took a tremendous amount of my time this last year. I hate to think how much money I got paid for that, but I don't go there. And what I would like to try and do is move forward. I've gone on a hiatus on my cases right now. I told them I'm not doing anything for a couple months because I got asked to take this over. And I would like to do it, but I would like to do it differently than what has been done. And I think it can be done. My life and my career, most of my career, I worked on doing things and putting things where people don't want them. Putting solid waste landfills in people's backyards, putting transmission lines in nuclear power plants. So I've had to deal with the public all of my life. I've also worked on opposing projects where I felt that they didn't belong. So I've worked on both sides of the aisle, so to speak, in the energy industry, solid waste industry. But the one thing I've learned about is public participation, working with the public, not bullshitting them, telling them what it is, and really working with them. And when people get that and you're doing that, it really works. So I think the key thing that I wanted to say right now is things that have been done have not been kosher for either the commission or CSHB. We'll just leave it at that. Number 2, in terms of the elections, Commissioner David, I knew about it. I know we basically have an unelected board, and that is an old French word, that's a chandra.
I agree.
And what I would like to do as I'm involved is to make sure, working with the town, to make sure that elections are publicized when it's time to put in a candidate, that people know about it. So I think that's important. In terms of the people, I was there the same 7 hours that Ron was at the poll, Mr. Mayor. I know who you were referring to.
Yeah.
I was there the same 7 hours he was. Most of the time, he didn't talk to the people I talked to. He was busy talking to you and Evelyn and other people. He didn't get engaged. I was talking to those people. I read it, I know what I'm doing. I read it, I know what I'm doing. And some people asked me why. I said, can I tell you why I'm voting no? And I went through that with them. But it was real clear those people knew what they were doing. We can debate about the written ballots, but I don't want to go there. What the problem was this is the bond issue, $46 million. Hey, they want to do a $46 million bond issue and they're going to rip up all of A1A in the sidewalks. That's real simple. This was more esoteric in terms of this is a charter, we're going to do this. People didn't get it. I didn't get it. I have 3 degrees in engineering. I like to think I'm not a dummy. I didn't get everything that was going on.
Jack,
and I didn't get it.
I took that presentation to no less than 10 buildings to present it, to show them why they should not be voting for this. So I know all about that $45 million bond issue.
I know. I remember you were involved. Commissioner Simon's involved. I said 3 of you were involved. I knew that. the point I was trying, it was very simple
Yeah.
compared to this. And so this is more esoteric, which is the reason I think you didn't get people involved like you did back then. It was much easier to get involved. And my last point I just want to say is it's time to get over it. Move on. And if you don't do it, we're all going to go nowhere in this town. And I'm not moving. We just, last February, we looked to move again and said, we're here for the rest of our lives. So I'm here 26 years. I'd like to think I'm going to live for a while longer. So I'm going to be in town. I care about the town. I want to see the town move forward. I'd like to see more things done. I'd like to do a focus group on what's important to this town and address the problems like traffic and bikes and, you know, erosion, beach erosion, stuff like that. And I'd like to hit the big things and go after them. Where are we going to be heading with this A1A reconstruction? It's going to be a mess here in town. So let's get over it. Let's move forward. Let's not look to place any blame anymore. If you don't like John, don't worry about it. He's moving. He's gone.
He threw his grenade. Yeah, we got it.
Okay?
He threw his grenade in the room and he's left town. We got it.
Okay?
Anything else?
And thank you very much for the time. And I appreciate the time today. And thank you very much.
Next thing on the agenda is C, the mission and vision statements. May I offer a suggestion?
Sure.
That we table that to the next
Sure.
meeting, and it's already 4:40.
Okay.
Everybody comfortable?
I
with that?
agree with that for sure.
And I'm a little spent.
No problem.
Thank you. Let's move on to page 58, approve and authorize the execution of the agreement with Aquifer Maintenance and Performance for $52,000.
Yes, sir. The last 2 fiscal years, you guys have approved. Going back 6 years ago, we had a study with all of our wells. With the study came up saying we need to clean the wells. 2 years ago, I came before you, the council, and asked to clean well 6. And then last fiscal year, we cleaned our injection wells. And then now we're just proceeding and we want to clean well 6. It's a routine cleaning. It's something that needs to be done after so many years. To just clean the pipes is pretty much what it's doing.
Any questions?
So the $80,000 appropriation, I guess we better have half the town sign that check. But aside from that, I assume that all of the detail, and there's a lot of it here, complies with all of our contracts, and our lawyer has also approved. There's any issues here we should know about? I assume not, in which case, if this is something we have to do,
Yeah,
it's
pretty
routine.
straightforward. It's budgeted,
It's been
proven.
competed.
Yeah.
We're resolved. I'm good.
I don't have any questions. We have to do it. And that's the bottom line. It has to be done. It's a maintenance issue.
Peg?
I'm grateful every day I turn on the faucet and the water's clear and good. And West Palm Beach yesterday, story in the Palm Beach Post, trying to find new sources of water, Clear Lake, and it's the 2 lakes at West Palm at 95 and Okeechobee are having problems. They're looking to the west. We're good. Whatever Pat needs to run that water, go for it.
I'm with you.
And then there's Del Rey too, right?
And actually, at the end of this month, we're going for another taste testing contest. So let's see how we can do.
You're
Came in
telling me
second
we're gonna
last
win this
time.
year.
We're going to win this year.
We're gonna
Came
win
in
this
second previous. This year, we're going to be number 1.
I'm in favor. I see that it's already been budgeted. I guess my only question is, why isn't this part of the consent agenda section?
We could, over the summer, we'll practice consent. Because consent is you don't talk about it, you just
Right.
approve it. But we tend to
Exactly.
pull all the consent and talk about it. So until we get that point or some time, a little bit of free time on our agenda to just get comfortable with that, we'll get to it. But you're right, perfect for consent.
That would be my suggestion, is something like this should go under consent agenda.
Oh, no, I wouldn't do that at this point in time when people are screaming that we're not telling them what's going on.
And it's an
I'm
$80,000
not voting
bill.
on something that we aren't able to say we discussed it. If you wanted to hear about it, you should have listened.
Well, you want to do a survey?
No, I don't want to.
Okay, need a motion?
I move that we approve the contract with Aquifer Maintenance and Performance in the amount of $52,125.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, on page 128.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Approve and authorize mayor to execute a financial advisory service agreement with Ford and Associates for financial advisory services related to Fire Station number 6 construction. This I don't want to do. We have to do it. I know we have to do it.
For those in the private sector or running your condo, these are the things that'll drive you crazy, but we have to have a municipal financial advisor involved in any process by which we procure a loan or indebtedness. So to get a bank loan and whatever that amount is, we know that's will come before you, financial advisor and a bond counsel. I'm not selling bonds, but I need a bond counsel. So that's kind of the price and process to issue debt in the municipal
I
setting.
thought we could just spend money. I don't understand these restrictions.
But John Ford and Associates, good team, come well recommended. They're the same price as the other firms. David Delana, our forthcoming finance director, has worked with them a lot on a lot of large municipal work. Very comfortable with them. So here's the contract again. That's all they're doing is getting the bank loan for us. So we need to spend the money to do it.
Counselor, there's no way around this. I know I beat up on Marshall and he said no, so I'm going to hear no again. But forgive me, I have to ask.
As a government body, if you are going to be borrowing sums, and it sounds like we probably are, you generally should get a financial advisor and a bond counsel to make sure it's tax exempt, whether they're actually floating a bond or just borrowing money. So if you go through the process, those are two that go hand in hand anytime a government borrows.
Okay, this is just a bank loan.
Even a bank loan, you want to make sure it's tax exempt. And that's where the bond counsel comes in to give you the opinion and the assurances that it will be tax exempt.
Okay, so why can't we do it ourselves? Or why can't we do it through your firm?
I sure don't have that tax expertise, and I don't know very many attorneys that do. That's why there's a subspecialty of bond counsel. And I've worked with various bond counsel and financial advisors over the years. They can't think of a government entity that ever didn't go out for an outside advisor and bond counsel in this area, because it's such a specialized, and you don't do it often, right? This is the first bond issue we've talked about, and I'm not even calling it a bond issue, but a borrowing. And as long as I can remember.
There's no way around it.
I wish there was.
Can we hold off on it? I mean, do we have to do this right now?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I tried. Trust
No, I
me.
mean-
Well, we haven't talked about it, so I have no idea. I
Well,
mean,
this is just to get the team together so we could start having this more structured conversation. That is, the favorable interest rate environment is going to change over time.
Rates will go up tomorrow.
So the
So
idea.
we're
Start
behind
tomorrow.
that. We can't do this before
But that's
tomorrow.
true. It's true. Well, you know, there's going to be 4 to 6 rate hikes over the next 15 months. And we will discuss the type of instrument so that if we decide to use more cash as we proceed, we'll try to get instruments that don't have those types of penalties installed. And we will get to that conversation in the amount of monies when we hit the streets to go secure those dollars, because some of the cash flow, man, this is what, you know, Ford and Associates spend a lot of time with cash flow. When do we need the money and how quickly? Because if you could equally space it out over 2 years, you may not need to borrow and just use cash.
Right.
But you don't know until you get there. But so if as long as certain penalties are gone,
Right.
we can get around. But those are coming. Those conversations are coming. But I need to get them on board to have those conversations with you in a more structured environment.
Yeah, so it kind of sounds like you're saying if the timing was such a way, we wouldn't even need to borrow. Is that what you're saying?
The potential exists, but you all have to agree to it. So that's the other thing too, is that you have to make the public policy decision. What do you want to do to that point? It's going to cost more than the money you set aside and more than the cash than you have. It's just going to cost more.
No,
So
no,
how do we bridge that gap?
Now's the time to do it.
Yeah.
So did we get the appropriations? Is that? And what's the
When
timing
they're
of that?
signed and in the bank, we get them. But I have been reassured by the powers that be that 2 are going through. We may lose 1, not a big deal, but we have 400,000 for the fire. It was cut in half due to the pie being so large for that particular group of asks for fire, police safety. Everyone wants that this year. And the enhanced lighting and the swales, we may lose 1 or half of those, but I've been reassured we're getting money.
So
400 for
400,000.
fire, I've been told for sure.
Okay.
But until the governor signs, like 2 years ago, we had all of this and COVID hit. So God help us if something else hits, hopefully not. And he should be signing within 2 weeks.
So even though we have this extra money coming,
But you can't count on that.
Right, you have to wait.
Because
It's
we
in the
could get
bank.
nothing.
Right, that
promise
could
you
happen again.
or we could get some, I mean, I guess my point is, can we delay it at all until it becomes a little bit more?
It's the opportunity cost of the money. So if we get this on, you get them on board. If we don't use them, they're not going to charge us the toll. Their fee is it's kind of a bifurcated process. If we end up just spending cash and just using them as a consultant, there's a rate structure to accomplish that. If there is an actual issue on indebtedness, it's a fixed fee to do it. The same goes with the contract I signed for the bond counsel. If we actually do it, it's this amount. If we don't, it's an hourly rate similar to what we pay Glenn
We're
for
gonna have to
advice.
borrow.
So you'll have this opportunity. I am not going to go close a loan without you guys. You can't do it anyway, but there'll be a lot of opportunity conversation for them to come in, grab our financials and sit with y'all and say, here are your options. Here's what the market's playing. Here's this guy's tied in with all the banks. He's doing this all the time. He'll tell you what exists, how quickly we can do it, things of that nature.
And will they also know the timing of the expenditures? So they obviously know this, the money that's available, but that is tied to when we have to actually spend it. So I imagine.
We will
have
do our best to anticipate cash flows, but unfortunately, because our flexibility doesn't exist there, we'll probably not know all the detail. And what I mean by flexibility is we can't just go and get this in a week. The process, the advertising, the solicitation, the contracts, the legal reviews, to get the money takes a while. So we could try to say that we'll need cash here, here, and here, but if that's wrong and we don't have that loan, then we have the opportunity loss that we're gonna have to now get more different type of loan instrument. Maybe a bank will give us a draw. I don't know. We need to get these folks on to see how creative we can get in that environment to give you as much flexibility on your decision making. But I can't speak to that because I don't deal with this every day like these folks do. So that's really what they're going to do. They'll come and answer all those questions like, yeah, I've seen it done here. You can't do this. This might exist. This might cost you more. The discount on that is bad. Maybe a penalty here. So you guys can have those. I can't, unfortunately, give you that advice.
Okay. Need a motion?
I move that we accept the contract with Ford and Associates for financial advisor services related to the Fire Station 6 construction and renovations.
Second.
I know you don't want, I don't want to either. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I promise it'll be painless. Just a big decision.
No, because this is stuff any of us can do, you know.
So-
I got
so
your hand
Can
up.
I ask, I didn't catch it. Who made the second?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, approval of the Highland Beach Canvassing Board meeting minutes. February 17th, 25th, March 7th, 8th, and 10th, all at once. I can't say anything because I don't know if they're right or not. I wasn't there.
Am I the only one who can move to approve them?
If
Okay.
any of you. are-
Okay, well, I'm happy to. I move that we approve all of the Highland Beach Canvassing Board minutes. So item 3F.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, the commission meeting minutes, they're on page 167, and it's for the January 18th commission meeting.
It is my pleasure to report there were 0 typos. And I make the motion to approve those January 18th
Second.
minutes. Okay.
Wait a minute, I got a few.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I'm
I guess I was too
sorry.
tired from the drive-in. Never mind.
Page
Did
171.
You overdid me, Doug.
Second paragraph. I think when the request was, it's the third sentence in the second paragraph, would like to know the negative aspects. I think that was for option 1, not option 4.
Okay.
And then that carries down to the second sentence in the next paragraph. Again, negative aspects of option 1.
Negative aspect, option 1.
Then it continues down 1, 2, 3 more lines raised in option 1. Then if we go down in B, the last sentence, town staff will prepare a resolution, not and resolution. And then on page 174, spoke about the accomplishments of the under 14, last paragraph in 14, Mayor Hillman spoke about the accomplishments he presented at the last town commission meeting. I don't think that's right. Might have been at, could it have been at a coffee with the mayor, or could it have been something else? I don't think we talk about accomplishments at commission meetings.
I wonder if it was that beach meeting you went to, that beach condo.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
What was that?
beach-
Beach condo with
That-
Scott, you and Scott and Weinroth at the. beach
Gotcha.
condo.
Okay, there we go.
So beach condos.
Condos.
Okay. That's all I have. That's enough. Anybody else have anything? Okay, we can take, I think Peggy made a motion, so then we just need to second it.
You made this.
You made the motion?
I did make a second, yes.
Okay,
Second,
all in favor? Aye. Okay, down to comments. John.
I think I made mine.
Okay, Peggy, or excuse me, Evelyn.
yeah, I think I made mine too.
Peggy.
2 quickies. We have Florida Fish and Wildlife committed to coming out in person, as I just made a note here, organized by Representative Caruso to review and check the speeds, the wakes, and so forth on a busy, maybe Friday afternoon at high tide. So they'll let us all know what's happening. And it might also, we might have some neighboring towns come with us. But it's just in the works because session just ended yesterday. So we'll see about that. And then I just have a quick report on some of the bills that passed and didn't pass. I'll just make it brief here because we're all probably hungry and tired. The tree protection passed, headed to the governor. Does not require permits to remove dangerous or invasive species trees such as Schefflera's ficus. Smoking in public places, particularly beaches and parks, may be regulated by towns, which had wide support. Then local business damages was watered down quite a bit. There are 3 ways to avoid a town being sued by a business who feels that an ordinance would affect it. In other words, if we restrict A1A to a bike lane, no cars, I'm just exaggerating. Obviously, that would affect Delray Sands and they would sue us. But this gives you possibilities of repealing, amending, or waiving any ordinances. Doesn't really affect our town too much, but it's interesting, and we'll see how it plays out in other municipalities. Cybersecurity was heavily favored and supported. Two different bills. The PFAS, the polyfluoral alkyl substances in plastic. DEP has been authorized to tighten rules for cleanup. And two more things. Short-term rentals, it failed. We're still in the same place as we were 2 years ago. Our ordinances are in place and not challenged. PTSD, workers' comp passed, both chambers, gives additional PTSD benefits and includes correctional officers. This was widely supported in the public service sector. Same for a $5,000 bonus for police and fire recruits to the state. And last but not least, Marshall's email yesterday regarding the communication marketing by a municipality, which came out of nowhere last Thursday. It was talked about early in the session and then sort of disappeared. It was sponsored by Rick Roth, who's in West Palm Beach Gardens, West Royal Palm Beach, northwest section of the county, and just reappeared. I'm not sure of the reasons why, except that 2 years ago, this was a major issue in other towns whereby a teachers union seeking more funding was promoted by different towns, particularly in Miami-Dade County, and it ended up in several different legal actions by municipalities. Why this sprang up now, I still don't have an answer. There is one way around any future dissemination of information we wish to do, which I haven't run it by anyone currently in the House or anyone, but we could, in fact, excerpt comments of our public meetings, because that is public record. And that would be able to be communicated through, say, Marshall's manager's minute, as far as what was lawfully discussed in an open public meeting. So that's just one idea I had for future information. Whether that flies, I don't know. We have to have Glenn and.
That's
other
a very
people
good
look at that.
idea.
It's already public information. You take the minutes, you say, Mayor said this, Natasha said that, and just excerpt it.
So let me walk through an example.
Mhm.
Counselor, if I said to Peggy, doing it as a 5% of our combined budget is a great idea because it would give us these 5 benefits, and I articulated those benefits. That could then be written up and mailed out to the population.
I believe it should. This came to me at like 4 a.m. So I can't tell you if it's lawful or would fly.
I wouldn't think
But-
you could mail that. I don't think you can mail it. You can
Well,
present
that's
it
what we
on.
need to find out, because if something is said in a public meeting, it is out there and there forever, whatever we say up here. I don't know if it may be excerpted and mailed. I'm just thinking out loud.
It's repeating what was
That
said
is
in a
already a
public
record,
meeting.
right?
I mean, if Marshall put it into his monthly, a newsletter that,
I don't think you can excerpt it because then you're taking bits and pieces. You could send them the minutes, the full minutes in
could
an
send-
email and say, here are the minutes from the meeting.
So,
Take a
right,
look.
possibly something like that. I'm
But
just
part of the
thinking out loud.
problem is you don't know how they're going to enforce it. And
Right, I know.
I think this will have results that the people who voted for it never intended it to have. And maybe they will revoke it.
yeah, these are the
Because
unintended
it's
consequences. huh?
it's a foolish
I understand.
thing, because how do you get information to people if you don't tell
I
them?
understand. I was just trying to think of different ways to handle it, and
I'm with you.
certainly anything we say is there. So it's just an idea. We can follow up on it later.
It,
Great.
yeah,
Yes.
that would be very helpful. Well, I wasn't going to bring it up, but I think it just magnifies the need, excuse me, for me to get into the buildings.
Mhm.
To go to the buildings, to be able to make presentations.
And in the
to the
future, we could all
residents in the
fan out. We
buildings.
could all fan out into different parts of the county.
I would say,
divide it.
yeah, great, but they want to hear from the mayor.
Okay,
You
then you
know,
go.
it's not me personally, it's the
I
title.
understand. No, I understand. I'm just
And-
saying we could
And
if
it's,
it's a
and
time.
it's almost, it's been impossible getting in because of COVID.
Oh, right, right.
And they just, a lot of the buildings just, they don't want to let anybody in. So
Understand.
having that meeting with the presidents, we were able to get 10 presidents because Teresa did a great job hounding them, following up. We finally got 10 there. So at least I know those 10 we can get into now.
That was a great
And
meeting.
hopefully it'll
Yeah.
grow from that. But that's going to be the key, is getting face to face with these people. Because the mailings, I mean, the mailings definitely helped. I mean, look at the difference between the people that walked in to vote versus the people that, voted by mail.
Right.
So they certainly were somewhat effective.
Right.
But now we obviously can't do that. But so I think the key is getting into the buildings.
Well, I've
Yeah.
emailed the league just asking if they, off the cuff would feel that that might be a viable option. And of course, it's only one day out now, but it's just an idea we can certainly
Yeah.
put forth and claim as our own. If it
The
works.
league didn't object to this?
Yes, they did vehemently, but it was just a last minute. And I've got an email out to Representative Roth too, who I know a little bit, and I haven't heard back. But again, they're all traveling back to their homes right now. So
And the food truck events, I mean, those were
Right.
well attended and gives us all an
Everyone loved
opportunity to
those,
sit
but-
with people and talk with people.
okay, that's it for me. Thank you all very much. Thank you for sending me to Tally. Looking for that money.
I guess my suggestion, I have a suggestion, and that is, under unfinished business, to always have an item for the fire rescue, update. It makes me uncomfortable that it's not, our number one strategic initiative is not on.
It's fair.
I really think it should be on every single, I could understand at least once a month, but does it hurt to make it in the item number one, unfinished business, and update, like maybe include the project plan and, what's coming up, spend a few minutes?
I would love to,
Okay, I would really like that.
because it's all
So-
done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you have it. I'm sure that you have it.
All done. Thank
I
you.
just think that it's really important that we talk about it. It's officially part of the agenda,
Good idea.
so, okay, I would like that. And then the other thing is, so the final fund balance policy document. I think there was like a change as a result of the last discussion. Will you send it to us for final approval? Do we make a motion to approve the fund balance?
You approved it
policy?
with the change, so I'll just send you the copy that I executed or we executed. Yeah.
I'd like to see the final.
Sure.
one. Okay, that's it for me.
You don't trust me?
I
thought we
do
worked on
trust
that
you,
today.
Marshall. Of course I do, but
Too soon? Too
the
soon?
document.
Okay.
Just one quick thing. I just want everybody to know, Milani, the property that the Milanis own that is
Not the farm.
adjacent to our north entrance, that vacant lot that always floods. I'm working a deal with her for her development. They're putting in either 7 or 9 townhomes there. The idea I had was they have beach access, but that's all they have. They have to carry all their beach stuff with them, umbrellas, chairs, cooler, etc. So I'm thinking, well, they're right next to our development. Why don't they become members of Boca Highland in terms of utilizing our amenities? So I proposed that to the Milanis, and they're thinking about it. Long story short, they're going to do that. And we're doing final negotiations on our agreement. So they're going to obviously pay us a one-time entry fee. And then they'll be paying a quarterly maintenance like everybody else does. So they'll be an independent development, but they'll become members in terms of use of our amenities. And then they'll pay us quarterly maintenance. So it's a win-win for us and for them. Enhances their properties, obviously, and we get money out of it. And we certainly, if we were 558 units, we can absorb 9 more families. We won't even know they're there. The other thing is they'll probably want to use our north entrance. So we're working out a separate deal for that as well. So that's where we stand.
If I can just clarify for the record, us is not the town. Us
No.
is
Us is Boca Highland.
town is not involved in this
Yeah, nothing to
negotiation.
do, nothing to do with the town,
town.
but I thought that my associates ought to know about it. Okay.
Way to think outside the box.
Okay.
That's excellent. That is excellent.
That's
No
all I
more
got.
lake.
I have nothing else to report. Anybody have anything to add here and here?
How about some fire? So again, CM at risk, we're out to bid for that, and that contractor will come in and help us fine tune the final architectural renderings. We're still moving forward with the option one you looked at before with some tweaks, timing. One of the things we're considering, but haven't until we get the CM at risk, is complete demolition. And the reason why I would say that is if we left a couple, 3 walls and it drags out times to do a phased project. So the architect was looking at it, the CM at risk will say, would it be more cost effective to raise the entire building and start from scratch? The same layout and the cost of delays, and it would be cheaper just to knock it down, start from scratch. We did get some, Sam did procure some estimates on a temp station. It wasn't that expensive to set up a temp station out front. So conceivably, we could move the fire operations into this temp station while we look at that. But we're waiting for the CM at risk to really drill down is, does it produce that savings that we're hoping to do and speed up the project? So those are like an internal conversation, but that's where the CM at risk, once we go through that process, will really help us out by saying, yeah, if you knock this down, the demo guys will get it out of the way, things move faster. So those things are going on. The plans are being refined, so we'll get those to you shortly. Our eyes were bigger than our wallets at times during our internal discussions. Thanks to the mayor telling us, whoa, we got to reel that back a little bit. So we're looking at getting that square footage just right and layout, working with Glenn and Tom to say from a fire operation, what's the most efficient and effective. So
a quick question. You're saying, so we were presented with 4 different options. Is that option number 2 that you're talking about? Like
it's option one, like the phased rebuild of the way it is, where we move them over to the old bays, redo this, then move them over to the new part and do that kind of concept. The question came up when we looked at that was to say, because Joby was looking at the rear of the building and said, hey, this isn't functional for access. We'd have to knock yet another wall out. So really it came down to 3 walls would be left. And I said, just a question, would it be just cheaper to knock the whole damn thing down at that point?
entire fire station down.
And then rebuild it back up in the same footprint that it is now with all of the amenities that you liked in option 1 as a commission. So we're
But-
fine tuning those little pieces.
So I guess one concern with that though was the getting cooperation from Delray Beach to move to the temporary station. To me, that was like a big reason why.
Well, that's good question. So we pushed Glenn on this and he's kind of leading us saying this is how it's done. This is industry practice. And, I guess they could still raise that question, but they're still getting moved around with 3 walls up. Would they rather, because some of these, I was thinking a temp station would be kind of a miserable, this looks pretty nice. This is probably better than that facility. As soon as I found out or felt that, same with the internal work group, chief included stuff. Once you look at that news, you're like, it's better than what they're in now. It's better. Okay, get them out of the way. We still have to work through that, but we want to check with the CM at risk and really pull that piece. But Glenn Joseph was really saying that you'd be surprised that this is pretty common practice. They'll go along with it. And we kind of, from a legal perspective, feel we have some rights to do that and say, we are providing you with something nice. If we were going to put them in a
Trailer.
beat up trailer that barely worked with a propane tank outside, that they would probably fight it. But this looks like a beautiful 6 bunk room modular that's, only a couple of years old with every brand new amenity and, vinyl floors and rest. It looks really nice. So
And I think
And
the other,
Delray, in fact, does that at at least one of their fire stations that they've been rebuilding for the last 5 years. They've been in temporary.
But no
quarters.
decision. I want to, there's no final decision. I'm just saying what's going through our discussions and thoughts as it relates to this. We really want to get that CM at risk to say, how do we get over that? And then to also help with selection of materials. And again, how the CM at risk works is once we get them on board, then we start negotiating max gross price. And then basically we step back and we're not involved in bidding and doing all, they take care of it. They get all of the subs and start controlling the project. So that works pretty well. We're working on getting some of the units, the EMS fire truck, looking at that, what options exist for us there. We got the fire code, Remus and Joseph are looking at that. I'm gonna start using last names. That just starts going quicker in my mind. So they're tackling the fire code and that. So that's going to come to you in April, I think. They're doing their last review before we throw it over to Len Rubin to take a look at because he helped us put the original parts together. The COCPM materials are all coming into place. There's things that we can't do, but we have to put together things we already have, all the job descriptions, org charts. They want a lot more than we want to give them or can give them, but this is the process they've chosen. So we're putting all of those final pieces in place. So the progress is moving great. Dr. Cohen is retiring, active retirement from day-to-day work. He really seems to want to be part of our internal work group. So he's helping us and giving us thoughts and ideas, which is great to have the medical director on our day-to-day team for
I mean, the
design.
fact that he's coming to the meetings even, it's like.
Yeah, he just
wow.
comes with the scrubs on and he's like, how about this? He came up with, I can't remember what his
Right.
idea was. He came up with a great idea. And we were like, boom, perfect. So the team, our net is widening of those that have been doing this for a long time and getting those in place. And the other thing is that this, over the next couple months, I will meet with each of you individually to see how you want to move into the recruitment and hiring of a fire chief process, the formal process. We'll have that conversation individually, so I can kind of get and see where your head's at and what you want to look and feel for that position. I'm guessing that would come in the fall, late fall is when we're probably going to have to start really making that next piece to get somebody here all the time. But otherwise, the progress is moving. I will be sure to make sure we have it now as a standing item and give you all the information we can. It's a construction manager is the next big piece, all the administrative paperwork stuff that's just kind of a little bit mind numbing. That's all going well, and they put it in place, and what type of medical record system and record management system and EMS care system, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff is coming into play. So it's going well. That's it.
Glenn, anything? All good?
Oh, yeah, the other item, I'm sorry, because you went to Glenn and it triggered it. I'm going to try, just to let you know, when I sent an email out, Glenn has hired a new attorney who's been doing a lot of backroom stuff for us. And I've asked Glenn, and I think he's going to come to a couple meetings just so you can meet him, see who he is, get comfortable, know who's doing a lot of our work, the day-to-day stuff. And so we're trying to work that out. But I sent you his resume so you can kind of get a feel of who this individual is and stuff like that.
20-year lawyer, 12 years with a lot of ideas on seawall, living shoreline.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So we'll bring him in just so you could see, so you know the three-headed monster of our legal team, right? So you see Len, Glenn, and now Alex, so you can see what's going on. Yep.
You're going to come back to us with details about this legislative thing.
The last minute prize that the legislature.
Yeah. That's a bonus.
Okay, Chief, can you give us a quick update on how things are going with the new boat and captain and what you found out there? Just a quick one.
Yeah. Sure.
Nothing's quick, huh?
No, actually, everything's going very, very well. A lot of positive interactions. The community's been great. Everybody that comes to talk to us, and more people in their backyards and in their front yards in this community, as you can imagine. So a lot of visibility. It's funny to actually visibly watch the boats slow as they're approaching you, as they see the blue light. So from a distance, the impact is almost instant. FWC's been out there a little with us, and we'll be coordinating some more things with them. So off to a great start with everything really right now.
Have you had to pull anybody over?
We've made some interactions. The very first weekend, we were able to help a boater that lost power and was drifting into one of the seawalls, came up on them. So they did a really good job with something with that. So it's yeah, but all going
You gotta
very well.
share, you gotta
No.
share. Wait a minute.
I held him, had my first rescue. I pulled a lawn chair out of the middle of the intercoastal. So
Oh, yeah.
it was floating right down the middle. Somebody was going to hit it, but so I have a first day I had my first rescue. So I was pretty proud of that.
I think I'm missing one.
Yeah. So that's it. You know, all good.
It's all
Thank
good.
you.
Okay. Anybody else have anything?
I will add something. I returned from this trip and an entire panel of our seawall had fallen in to the water. Could have been hit. It was just inspected 2-3 months ago. So
Ouch.
that was an example of it falling.
Right.
So we'll see what happened, but those things happen. It'd be the third time our island has had a seawall hit in the last year.
Oof,
So
not good.
thank you.
Okay, we will call it at 5:20. Thank you all. Bye-bye.